Over on YouTube.
Oh, that's
It
why.
is
Oh,
streamed
yeah,
right
yeah,
now.
yeah. Yeah, no, I was like, why can I hear your voice twice? I was wondering why I could hear the music, and I was like, wait, what's going on? And then I realized I have 30 tabs open.
That would do it too.
Hey
And
everybody,
I remember
we're
I
a
needed
little
the
bit
link,
late
and I
getting
opened it
started.
for that link, and then I was like,
We'll be up
yeah,
and going
at
here in a minute.
everyone.
A1. Oh, hopefully everybody in the live chat, you're all hanging out, and it's not what that we want to start late, but I mean, it's we're getting to an almost on brand point with that. So we're just waiting for Radical. So we're gonna just give it a few more minutes and keep riffing off as we were before. Hopefully, anyways, we're having kind of an organic conversation, but it's hard to have that when you know everybody's watching you now. So
I mean, maybe that's a problem for you. I like being watched. That's just me, though.
see no evil here.
Kinky.
No evil. Oh God.
I'm a content creator. Imagine if that wasn't the case, right? Like, how weird would that be? It's like, yeah, I don't like being watched, and but so I decided to put my face on the internet for quite literally millions of people to see. Like, no.
Someone said Radical is waiting to join, and he said so in the chat.
Check your email.
There he is now. Okay. Booger. Is that
Maybe
just a matter of like? Is that a matter of my pop-ups not working properly? Oh, look at that. We have Radical here.
There we
everybody, we're going to go get ready, and we're going to deliver the goods. And we're going to bring you our debate tonight. Are there more than two genders? So sit tight, everybody, in the live chat, and we'll be right back.
All right, so Sanvi, how does it feel?
So,
Not only are you the only woman here, but you're the only one without a duplicate name.
oh, I actually didn't even think about that.
Yeah. Two of us are duplicates.
You're both Tony?
He's Anthony, I'm Tony, but my middle
Okay,
name.
since we have a break, I'm changing outfits. I'll be back.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, nice to meet you, Tony and Anthony. And good to see you again, Ryan.
Yeah, it's
Nice
good
to
to
meet
see you.
you.
Again.
Nice to meet you, Ryan. I am your partner, so it should be good.
It'll be a fun time.
Do you want to go first? Do you prepare a pretty long opener?
I've got a good intro. Sure.
Okay. Yeah, you go ahead and go first. I'll go after you.
Yeah, just so everyone knows, I am streaming right now. So if there's don't dox yourself or anything. People can hear you.
Gotcha.
Okay.
What is it? I had a joke and then I forgot it. I don't know why.
All good. Happens to me all the time.
No, I remember what it was. You said, "Nice to meet you. I'm your partner." It's like, well, that's great because they legalized that back in 2014. So,
True. We stand.
Overville. Nice.
Yeah.
No, I know it's not the conversation, but just to go ahead and I suppose set the mood. Do y'all think that there should be a legal definition difference in civil union / marriage?
No.
Nah.
Marriage is a civil institution and always has been. Just because
it's
there's been religious connotations attached to it over time and in different cultures doesn't mean that it doesn't.
That's the question. Was the religious institution first or was the social aspect first?
Social aspect.
I would say, just from my perspective, because I never get to say too much in these conversations, it is nice if when you pass away, your partner gets to have whatever you had. You know what I mean? Like gets your stuff. That's kind of nice.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Just hold on, guys. I'm just waiting for the window capture here. Everything's got to move so slowly when it knows.
I gotta figure out how to stream this properly.
I only have one camera, so I can't stream it properly.
Well, no, I mean, if you're doing OBS, you can just do
screen capture.
No, you can do virtual camera. It's built into OBS now, so I have virtual camera.
Really?
Yeah. So
hey, today I learned.
But
I thought it had to be different because what's his name? Avalon. When I saw his debate with Sanvi, he had two different cameras because it looked like he was never looking at the debate, and it's because he technically wasn't because he was streaming and he was looking at his stream camera.
Yeah,
so he clearly had two cameras.
It depends on like your setup, but it's a recent addition, and there's a it was recently added directly to OBS. But prior to that, there was somebody that coded up a pretty decent virtual camera capture for a scene source, and so I'm using that. So I'm everybody's on stream right now, right? I don't have it set up to where it's just my face and everybody else is talking kind of in a corner because I think that looks like trash. But that's just my personal preference for it.
I don't know. Me personally, whenever I stream, no matter what content I have, I don't even show the content. I just show my face because I'm the main event.
Fair.
So that's the way that I see it.
Yeah,
like
that's fair. But
like I just talk about things, but like whatever I'm talking about, you can't see them. You only see me.
The main event.
Exactly. He's got it.
You're a good looking dude, so it could be worse.
He knows what he knows what he's got. He knows what he's got.
Yeah, I don't got a beard, that's for sure. Somehow or another. Like, I got everything else and I can't grow a beard. Like God knew it. If I could grow a beard, it'd be over. No one would compare.
You know that might happen when you're 30. We do go through second puberty.
Man, I don't want to wait till I'm 30, bro. I have 15-year-olds walking into my freshman honors biology class full beard like they're a lumberjack, bro. Like they've been chopping wood for at least the last 30 years, knowing that they're not even half of that age. It's crazy.
Sounds like myself. I was going to say, just to poke the bear a little bit, I heard that there's some sort of thing you can take. Like I think it's called testosterone.
Minoxidil.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Wow. Okay. Testosterone's crazy.
I'm just trying to trigger you all before we start. Anyways, let's get going, guys. We got our screens figured out, so I'm going to intro the show and let's get rolling. Hey everybody, sorry for the late start there. Tonight we're going to be debating, are there more than two genders? And to start us out, I think either Ryan or CSP is going to start us out. Oh, whoops, OBS has crashed.
Oh no.
Went to start.
You love to see it. Great start.
I'd love to see a great start. And now I have to reopen and relaunch this. Not fun.
That's terrible.
Oh man, isn't that great? It's
20 minutes late and then OBS crashes now. It didn't crash, before. No, now.
Having fun. Oh well. You know what it is? I'm gonna close down as many as I can because it's so hot right now where I am. Like,
oh yeah, that could be definitely it.
Everything's acting funny. I had a gig the other night and literally every piece of audio gear, like.
No, that's not honestly, respectfully, that's crazy. Imagine not just having liquid cooling in your computer. Couldn't be me.
I do not.
I should. I need to build a new PC. I think I built the computer I'm using right now in like 2013 or something. It's surprising that it still works as well as it does.
Bro, 2013? That was like Noah's Ark. That was so long
I'm telling
ago.
you. I know. That's what I'm saying.
Like I think Adam and Eve got kicked out of the garden like slightly like before that. Like that's
it was around that time.
I'm not going to take this ageist babble.
Okay, relax, granddad. Relax.
You will respect your elder millennial granddad, okay?
Is that imagine my granddad being a millennial though.
I know, right?
My parents aren't even millennials.
Are they? They're Gen X, right?
Yeah.
I'm assuming. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like my grandpa's probably...
no, my parents are actually Gen Z.
Nice.
That doesn't check out.
No, it does.
Wait. Okay.
I mean, like if I was Sanvi's age, the math could check out.
I don't know.
The youngest mother in like ever recorded was like 5. So
I mean, if you were born in '96, if the Zoomers start in '96.
Oh, is that true? Okay.
Yeah.
No, yeah, no, like
96.
96.
Okay.
So like it wouldn't work for me because I'm 24, right? Like I'm on the upper end of Gen Z, right? But if I was Sanvi's age, oh yeah, it worked perfectly.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna make sure with James we can just start restreaming because this is being the fun tonight. It's my life lately. It's like everything must go awry.
If the Lord didn't present us with challenges, what would be the struggle that is called life?
There we go. It's still buffering. So
don't look like that. No, don't make that face.
It's okay.
I didn't realize this until somebody just messaged me now. They're like, you make so many faces during your debates, and this is why people make memes out of your face.
It's good to be expressive.
We're gonna make sure that we're streaming, and then we're going to keep going. Sorry, everybody.
That's why I have to portray the toxic masculine stoic individual and just never make any faces the entire time.
No, and the thing is, I do it unknowingly. Like, I'm not trying to be rude or anything like that. Just prefacing that, if you guys see me make a face,
don't worry,
it's literally unintentional. And then people are always like, my face just looks disgusted at the.
We know why, Sanvi. We know why that happens.
All right. I think we're back up and running here, and everybody's complaining that we're muted, and that's exactly what I was waiting for. Yay! So we're back up and
Nice.
running. All the tech is being fun today. Welcome to Modern Day Debate, everybody. Tonight we're going to be debating, are there more than two genders? And to start us off, I think CSP is going to kick us out with the up to 6-minute intro.
Ryan, you wanted to go first? You said you had a good intro. Go
I
for
got
man.
it.
I'll
Sure.
go after. Oh, good.
All right. So, welcome everyone. Tonight, we are debating the question, are there more than two genders? To engage with this question, we have to ask first, what is gender? If we are to equate gender with biological sex, then I might largely agree with the affirmative position, though I'd point out that sex itself is a gendered trait, and even by most definitions of biological sex, it's more of a spectrum than a binary. That is perhaps a conversation for another day, hopefully. I'm hopeful then that those on the other side of this topic recognize a distinction between sex and gender. I understand sex to describe the biological attributes of females and males, and gender then to describe socially constructed roles, behaviors, and identities, which are in a spectrum which includes femininity and masculinity. I pulled these specific definitions from a 2018 article from Endocrine Reviews, a highly respected journal with impact factor of over 15, distributed through Oxford University Press. And I quote the opening line of the abstract there, which says that a sex and gendered informed perspective increases rigor, promotes discovery, and expands the relevance of biomedical research. I will probably post this link just in case anyone's curious about where I get that from. I'll post that in the chat. So gender specifically then includes socially constructed roles, behaviors, and a spectrum of identities that include, but are not necessarily limited by, archetypes of femininity and masculinity, which are themselves evolving and differ based on time and culture. The recognition and acceptance of the existence of more than two genders stems from an evolving understanding of human identity within the scientific community, not from some desire to be politically correct. Extensive research in fields such as psychology, sociology, and anthropology has shed light on the multidimensional nature of gender, transcending traditional binary classifications. This growing body of scientific knowledge supports the notion that human gender identities encompass a broader spectrum while still acknowledging the intricate interplay of biological, psychological, and sociocultural factors. Embracing this scientific perspective allows us to appreciate and celebrate the diverse tapestry of gender identities that contribute to the richness and complexity of human existence.
All right, well, that's all your intro there. That wasn't quite 6 minutes, so we'll hand it over to CSP,
Yield
and
my
you've got
time.
up to 8 minutes there to expound.
Thank you, Ryan, for having me on this MDD again. It's been a pleasure. And thank you to the audience who is listening in on this conversation in order to find truth through careful examination. Before we start our debate today, we need to first define terms. Gender, according to Webster's dictionary, is the behavioral, cultural, or psychological traits that typically associated with one's sex. Webster goes on to state that among those who study gender and sexuality, a clear delineation between sex and gender is typically prescribed, with sex as the preferred term for biological forms and gender limited to its meaning involving behavioral, cultural, and psychological traits. In this dichotomy, the terms male and female relate only to biological forms, otherwise known as sex, while the terms masculine, masculinity, feminine, femininity, woman, girl, man, and boy relate only to psychological and sociological traits, also known as gender. In the nomenclature and non-technical context, though, there is no clear delineation, and the status of the words remain fairly complicated. My opponents will likely argue that these distinctions are superficial at best or downright arbitrary and harmful at worst. Intuitively, this kind of makes sense, but we cannot rely on intuition as a basis of truth. The World Health Organization defines gender as the characteristics of women, men, girls, and boys that are socially constructed. This includes norms, behaviors, roles associated with being a woman, man, girl, or boy, as well as a relationship with each other. As a social construct, gender varies from society to society and can change over time. I am sure that my opponents would agree with me, and the World Health Organization, that gender norms do vary from society to society and culture to culture. And while we can point to social constructs that are broadly shared by all of humanity, we can also pinpoint to different configurations that are not. If we acknowledge that these are valid expressions of the human experience, then it is reasonable to say that there are more than two genders. Let's turn to some examples. A cursory look at Two Spirits Wikipedia page discusses how various indigenous cultures didn't have a hard and fast concept of gender as being intrinsically linked to sex. What I mean by that is that there are words for men and women who perform the duties of traditional gender roles of the opposite sex. One such example is the Iwakio, a Cree people's word often associated with a male-bodied person living as a woman. Among the Lakota people, there is the Winket, who were also male-bodied and lived as women or fulfilled some ceremonial role that could not be fulfilled by either a man or a woman. These concepts are not limited to just the indigenous people of the Americas either. In Angola, there were the Chibaidos, who performed as spiritual arbiters in political and military decisions. These people served some sort of additional social role outside of those performed strictly by males or females. Furthermore, concepts and explanations exist in these cultures for why they exist. They have words that are separate from male and female. Why would I say that these aren't genders? But for the sake of argument, let's say that you believe that gender is made up nonsense and that all that matters is if you are male or female. My first response to that would be, okay, but that doesn't really tell me how I should live as one sex, male or female. My second response, though, is not so fast. What aspects of one sex determine the essence of being a man or a woman? Is it brain development, sexual organs, biological dimorphism, or the large gamete? Do we not recognize that a male can be more or less masculine than another male, or even compared to a female and vice versa? Are we to ignore the intersex and chromological differences, albeit where, exist? If not, why do you think gender is strictly a binary? It is my hope that over the course of tonight's debate, we will look at these distinctions, or lack thereof, and reveal that gender binary is wrong historically, biologically, and culturally. And with that, I yield the floor. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, CSB, for your introductory statement. We're going to kick it over to the other side, but I just want to remind everybody that all of our guests are going to be linked in the chat for at Modern Day Debate. We are a neutral platform. We do debates on science, religion, politics, you name it. So give us a like if you are enjoying this type of content. And also a quick reminder, we will be doing a Q&A at the end of this discussion. So if you have questions for our speakers, get them in now if you want them to be read early on in the QA. And with that, we'll kick it over to the other side. I'm pretty sure, Capone, you said you wanted to start us out?
I don't know, Sanvi, am I going first?
Go ahead. Yeah.
All right. By the way, I just want to say, Sanvi didn't know the format. She thought it was 6 to 8 minutes between the both of us, so mine will be a whole lot shorter. Okay. Just want to say thank you, Ryan, for having us. I appreciate you having us on here. Hello, Modern Day Debates audience. My name's Tony, and I stand before you today as an advocate for clarity and truth in the realm of the gender discourse. While I may not be a frequent debater here on YouTube, I have been actively engaging in discussions on platforms such as TikTok, where you can find me under the handles such as Instagram, Tony Talks TT, and TikTok, Tony Talks TT. I'm currently banned, but give me 48 hours. These links will be provided in the description for those who wish to come see me. Now, let us address the fundamental issues at hand. The concept of gender, which I believe should be understood as a reflection of our human conception of sex. In this context, I assert that there are only two sexes and consequently only two genders. Allow me to restate this perspective in a more formal manner. Gender is intrinsically linked to the biological sexes we are born with, and the terms we use to describe these genders correspond to specific human sexes at different stages of life. Therefore, I contend that the two genders recognized ought to be simply man and woman. In terms of adults, for children, you have boy and girl. When we consider the transition from childhood to adulthood, this understanding extends to the terms boy and girl as well. By modifying the condition to encompass age, we acknowledge that these terms aptly represent the two genders we commonly attribute to individuals at varying stages of their lives. Onto the meat of the conversation. If there are not two genders, how many are there? There are various weak attempts made to answer this question, and in order to answer this question, we need to know what our opponents define as gender. Is gender a social construct? Is gender an internal perception? Is gender psychological, social, or neurobiological? Maybe a combination of all three. These are important questions to help us answer how many genders there are. And that is my opening statement. Thank you.
Yeah, so just to expand a little bit upon what Tony said, we will argue that there are two genders based on the premise that there are two sexes, male and female. To address any intersex objections right off the bat, male and female are defined genetically on which developmental pathway you undertake. Females do not have an expressed SRY gene, while males do. This is just innately a dichotomy by defining it this way. Furthermore, many people argue that gender is a social construct because of gender norms, gender expectations, masculinity and femininity, to which we ask the question of if gender is a social construct, then why do we already have descriptors such as gender norms and gender expectations, right? So we already have words to describe what people expect of the sexes, but that's not what gender actually is in and of itself. But with that, we'll get into the discussion later on, so I yield my time.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your opening statements there. And I'm sorry that I had to step out. I choked on water. That happens sometimes. And I just didn't want you guys to have to hear me going. Anyways, so let's continue on with the discussion. We're going to kick it into open floor format. We usually kick it over to the other side to launch us off. So, Ryan, CSP, the floor is all yours. Let's kick it.
You want first or?
So Zanfi, and do you want to be called Capone or Tony?
Whatever floats your boat, really.
All right, well, we'll go with Tony since that's how we were
Right.
introduced. So Zanvi and Tony, you've already kind of like basically said that the sexes are where we should focus for gender, and that intersect people, while they exist and they're valid, right? They exist, right? You agree with that? That because it is some sort of developmental pathway that usually diverges, that is they're going to fall into one of those two categories. Why do you think that as a clarifying question?
Intersex people are male or female. So the way intersex is defined is that you have characteristics of the opposite sex. Like, for example, a female might have a Y chromosome with Sawyer syndrome, or we have CAH syndrome, or we have, androgen insensitivity syndrome. With any intersex condition you can name, the way I defined the diversion of the developmental pathways was if the SRY gene was activated. So that's the way we define it.
So how is that then really socially relevant to the entire conversation if we're talking about people that exist within outside of this primary binary that has existed throughout all of time? We're going to go even into someone's beyond their chromosomal makeup, but we're going to go into a specific gene within that chromosome. Then why is that useful to you?
Yeah, so I think this kind of presupposes that I take utility as some type of measure for how I'm going to use a term. Simply when I say, this is the way I say, when I'm referring to women, this is what I'm referring to. When I'm referring to boys, this is what I'm referring to. So I would like to hear maybe a better definition if you have one, but I don't think there's anything false about mine just because you disagree that it's socially useful.
And also, another way to answer the question is one thing that I think the one way that this conversation always kind of falls into is the essentially making different words mean the same things when they don't, right? So in terms of what is the social, like our definition of gender, one of the two sexes, what does that have to do with the social aspect? It doesn't, because gender doesn't refer to the social aspects, right? And you kind of mentioned it in your opening statements as well, Cypher, or Anthony, my apologies. You mentioned it in your opening statement. You talked about different genders in different cultures, and then in the very next sentence you use the word gender norms, right? Gender norms, gender roles, gender expectations, these are not gender. These are things that are typically associated with a gender, right? So to answer for the social part of it, it's like, well, there are different words for that, right? Like, you're right, our definition doesn't function in that sense because that's not the purpose of it.
Well,
Interesting.
okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
well, I guess so it's interesting that you remove all of those things from the umbrella term of gender. Like, my understanding again of gender is like it includes these socially constructed the roles, behaviors, and identities in that spectrum. Why do you think this is why do you think this is so easily removed from the concept of gender? I think this is like what gender is encompassing specifically. But yeah, why do you disagree with that exactly?
Yeah, because I think we already have terms to describe masculine and feminine roles, cultures, behaviors, expectations without actually using genders such as boy and girl. Like we have feminine boys, right? Like a person can engage in every single traditionally masculine trait and still be considered a boy. So this is clearly not how we define gender.
It seems like a feminine boy would be a description of this person's gender expression and gender identity. Like it combines the expression, the feminine presentation, as well as the identity, the being a boy. It seems like this is perfectly this makes perfect sense within the
so
definition of
gender
gender I'm using.
expression.
By the way, one quick thing, Sambi. I knew I was forgetting one of them. Gender expression is another one of those terms that are kind of like all lumped in together. Like you can express yourself however you feel, right? Like if you want to be a man, you want to be feminine, fine. You want to be a woman, you want to be masculine, or any combination of it. Like none of that actually quote unquote matters.
Sure, but this doesn't really explain the fact that when I read off the definitions, I read it from both Webster's and World Health Organization, direct quotes from both of those, and they included these things such as gender norms and expression because we have to make a definition that is somewhat broad in order to encompass how other cultures might approach this from a sociological standpoint. So we have to say gender norms in that because we can't just say gender because that's going to be different across cultures, which is also why during my opening statement that I've listed off various other cultures that have distinct language for these genders that we can define as a gender inside that precept.
So that was
yeah,
actually
other cultures having something really has no bearing to me. I know people often use this argument, oh, we've had two-spirit indigenous people and historically transgender people have always existed of third, fourth, fifth genders or sexes. And I don't think this really has any bearing on the truth of the proposition because the same people also rejected germ theory. Does that mean now we should reject germ theory? No, like clearly we don't have to agree.
It depends on the culture, right? And then if you wanted to go that way, then we can talk about how in the 18th and the late 18th century during the Victorian era, there was the concept of androgyny and dandies, and these were also distinct expressions of a gender that were, and then we also had the trans people and etc.
Just because people historically believed something or historically practiced something has no bearing on if something is true or not.
Or whether or not that we as a society or as a culture should partake in it as well, right? Like there are plenty of actions. I'm not going to list any of them because we can all think of terrible, different terrible things. But there are plenty of actions that different cultures would partake in that we would say, no, we don't want to do that because we view. I'm not saying that we should view the ideology is bad, but just because another culture does it doesn't mean that we should do it. Also, two quick things. You brought up the definition from World Health Organization and Merriam-Webster's. When it comes to defining words, Oxford is regarded as the dictionary for the English language, and that's not how Oxford defines the word. And the Oxford definition actually kind of contradicts itself as well. It's nonsensical in its own definition for point one, and point two, bringing up the two-spirit thing. So actually, an interesting part about that is, and that's why I said the way that people look at the gender discussion nowadays, it only makes sense if you start conflating different terms and make it so they all mean the same thing. I actually have a friend who has Native American ancestry, and she hates when people bring up the two-spirit thing because it's not defined as a different gender. What it is, in almost every single instance that you could look at through history of different genders, is quite literally just you have let's take a man, right? And instead of doing things that are typically associated with men, they would do things that are typically associated with women, right? And that's what. But
they came up with these cultures came up with a different language in order to, or different terms, I should say, to define how these people exist in the world, right?
Yeah.
And all language is a way to have a way to categorize how we interact with the world in order to define things and understand the world in as best way as we can. So if these cultures created different terms for these people and they had different cultural roles in those different genders, then why would that be why wouldn't that be gender?
So just to be clear, by that logic, there are infinite genders then, because I can only imagine.
I'm open to that as well.
I'm open to that. I don't see how that's.
You said wait, Sami, one quick thing. So you said that because they essentially had like different names for them in their cultures, right? That would make them a different gender, right?
If they fulfilled different cultural roles, then by our definition of gender, then they would be a different gender. Yes.
Is a tomboy a different gender?
A tomboy does not necessarily mean that it's a different gender because they're still expressing themselves and all this other stuff, and then maybe self-identify with, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we have a different expression for that. So
I think tomboy.
Go ahead.
Tomboy is a good example. Again, like we brought up a feminine boy and a tomboy. In this case, it's someone who's expressing a more masculine presentation. So that's their social presentation. However, their gender identity is still that of a girl. That's like the kind of definition understanding that we have of a tomboy. And this does seem, I mean, this does seem to be a different, I guess, a different construction of, like a unique construction of a gender, I guess, given these different pieces that we can put together to create our genders, being, again, like the behaviors, the roles, the expression, as well as the identity.
Do you guys believe that babies are born agender?
Not necessarily.
But
Why?
they have to be because they can't
I
identify.
don't think by your logic they can have a gender identity or expression.
Yeah, I don't think they have identity or expression necessarily, but I think
a gender.
Then how do they
well,
have
yeah.
a gender?
So first of all, I mean, they're kind of assigned gender at birth for sure.
I thought it was assigned sex at birth, not gender. Don't you
I
guys
mean,
make a
I think it's
sex and
both.
gender
I think it's generally both traditionally. I think most people
Yeah.
in that case use them almost interchangeably.
So why can we assign a gender at birth, but we can't assign genders to adults?
I mean, you can do
assign a
whatever
gender.
you want. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's true. But like what I would say to that
what I'm saying is you
real quick,
guys don't make a gender sex. I mean, you do, excuse me, make a gender sex distinction. So the proper way was they're assigned sex at birth, right?
I think well, I'm saying it's both. I'm saying I am making the distinction, and I'm saying that like both are done generally at birth. I think that most people conflate them when they're assigning these things at birth.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying like most people use female and girl interchangeably?
Correct.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. And to be clear, I think like most people are cis people, right? Most people are either cis men or cis women or cis boys or cis girls. So most people, their gender identity aligns with their biological sex. So I definitely wouldn't be disagreeing with that.
Okay, yeah, but just to like get back to the point. So if a baby, so what you should be advocating for is that they are a gender at birth, though, because truly they should only be assigned a sex, not a gender. Because in your opinion, how can a gender be assigned if it is something that's socially constructed and whatnot? Can't be assigned. That's your internal perception.
Well, you can be treated differently based on your gender, and that's part of the social, like kind of social and cultural like imposition of gendered roles. So like if you're a girl and they put you in like a pink room rather than a blue room, these kinds of things are gonna start, like, and a million other things are gonna start to shape your gendered view of yourself as well as the world around you. Like I think these things do start pretty early. Like the impositions of gender roles, like they start to act on you even before you're born in some cases.
And honestly, that's a fairly new phenomenon as well. We're talking 1960s or so for the United States, where we started differentiating between boys and girls clothing up until I think it was the age of 7. Don't quote me on the exact numbers here, but that was generally what it is.
So say we have a non-binary person who calls themselves non-binary, but who visibly presents as female or woman to most of society, and then society treats them and poses these expectations on them as they would a woman or girl.
Sure.
Then if we're taking how people treat you as a qualifier for what your gender might be, then they're not non-binary, they're just a girl.
No, because it's the interplay between how society treats you and how you self-identify. There's the interplay to that. We have to acknowledge that.
Is it either or? Is it both?
It's both.
For me, what the determining factor about like what someone's gender is, for me, that's just the identity, but that's not going to override how people treat you or perceive you, right? You can't necessarily impose like, oh, I identify this way, so I'm going to make people perceive me in another way. Like it doesn't really work like that. Obviously, this is where a lot of the conflict around like gender dysphoria and things comes from for trans people. So.
Right. So when you're talking about gender, you're more so referring to gender identity and not gender expression, if I understand correctly.
So when I'm referring to someone's gender, I'm largely like the determining factor for me for like what their gender is. I'm talking about gender identity,
Okay.
And I will at times use those fast and loose, but I am specifically talking about gender identity. But I acknowledge that their gender expression doesn't necessarily align with that, and there's the perception of them in society also doesn't necessarily align with that.
And what do you take gender identity to be?
It would be generally people are going to look around at the world around them, and they're going to see, okay, there are these roles of women, there are these roles of men, and there are these views of what these things are. This is going to be relevant to time, place, culture, and people are going to look around at that, and they're going to determine, okay, I reflect more with that word, so I'm going to identify with that one. That's essentially, I think, broadly where this or like the process of deciding what your gender identity is, although it's a bit more complicated than that.
But the
I think that's
problem,
largely what's
the
happening.
problem with that one, there's no singular instance where you can identify as something and then you become that identification, right?
Why
Like
not?
there's not. Why not?
Yeah, if we're talking about self-identification, then
Because like you can't, just because you say that excuse me, just because you say that you are something doesn't make you that thing. Like there are qualifiers for every single instance of the word, even for something as simple as things that you literally cannot change, right? Like that's the qualifier for it, right? Like let's say that I make the statement I identify as a black man, right? Or let me more specifically, I identify as black, right? The qualifier for that would be that I am of African descent, right? If I want to say that I identify as a Christian, there are certain pieces of the doctrine that I would have to agree with, understand with, and know in order to actually have that mean anything, right? I can't just say, "Oh, I identify as a Christian," and then reject Jesus Christ. That would make me not a Christian, right? I
mean,
can't
there's
say that
some
I
Christians that
identify
do
as
that, so.
and they're not
And they're
Christian,
not
and
Christian.
that's
But
what I'm
that's to
saying. They're not
you.
Christian.
To them,
No,
they
no,
would
no,
still be
No,
considered
no, no,
Christian.
it
no,
would
quite, no, no, quite,
contradict
no,
the
yeah,
definition, so it
it
would be a
contradicts the
contradiction.
definition. Yeah, like no, they quite literally are not Christian,
Yeah.
right? Or like if I say that, oh yeah, I'm a Packers fan, right? But I think that the Packers are a baseball team, right? Like that means that I'm not actually a Packers fan. There's no instance that you could identify as anything where it just makes you that thing.
Well, so I think to be clear, for like the religious example, it's like you can say that they're wrong to say that they're Christian if they don't align with these like particular rules, but it seems like what's really happening is that they have a different idea of what it means to be a Christian than you do, right? So it's not necessarily true that they're not a Christian. It's just that what they're saying when they say they're a Christian is different than what you're saying when you say they're not.
Well, right.
No.
So that's just the thing. You can replace the term, but you can't replace a concept. So if we have a triangle, for example, somebody might say, well, I define a triangle as a person that's above 5 foot. Okay, so not everybody in the Zoom call is a triangle. Yeah, that's clearly not what we're talking about.
I'm actually
We're
4'10".
what are you actually referring to?
Well, I mean, this is where the social utility comes in, and you already rejected that.
No, I said like presuppose social utility.
So social utility, where's the, okay, so here's the question. Both of you say that there are infinite genders. Where is the social utility in having infinite genders? And the source that was listed in, I think it was Ryan's opening statement with the academic OUP thing, where it says it expands the relevance of biomedical research. What does having infinite genders have to do with utility? Like where's the utility in that for us?
The social utility comes into play when you're talking about how people can fit into society. If we have these very narrow, predefined boxes that we're just shoving people into, the people that cannot fit within those boxes are left to the wayside in any kind of in any kind of capacity, right? So if a person is, let's say they identify, let's say they're a trans woman, right? And then we're saying only women are cis women. That's the only women that are. We're saying women is just a sex, right? If that trans woman doesn't fit into the woman sex box, then that has other implications from a social perspective of how they're going to be treated. That's just the way it works.
This argument conflates truth with utility. It can certainly serve utility to lie to people, but it has no bearing on the truth of the proposition, right? Like we're arguing for truth here. Are there more than two genders? Is transgender identity valid? These are yes or no questions to if it's true or not. So it has nothing to do with if you're harmed or if your happiness levels are decreased by our answers. It has to do with which answer is right.
Yeah, so I actually largely agree with what you're saying there. And like for me, the way I interpret it, what we're looking at, like the reason there's all this this scientific idea of there being a spectrum of genders, it seems that what they're saying is that there are like science is just about like observing the world, right, and like measuring what's happening in the world. And what they're measuring is that people are saying I identify as a man or a woman, and oftentimes this identity does not align with their biological sex. So this is a fact. Obviously, whether you agree with like the validity of their identity is one thing or another, but they absolutely do have these identities, and they absolutely do often contradict what we would expect of their biological sex. So just acknowledging this phenomenon allows us to better categorize or to have more discrete categories that we can examine, that we can do science with when we're measuring and categorizing people. Where we're going to continue, or we're going to want to use these different categories. And I don't know why
if gender is infinite, do you guys validate xenogenders or neogenders or any of that?
What do you mean by validate? Do you mean
like, are they true?
Like
to you? Do you fully accept?
No, like is it true? Kind of what I mentioned earlier.
I mean, if we're saying that gender is infinite and it's just a massive combination of different factors that present themselves in a certain way, then yes.
Like,
Yeah.
you know what a xenogender is, right? So we're on the
Yes,
same
I know
page.
what
on this.
xenogender is.
I
also
don't-
know.
I don't know.
I also know what
No,
other kin
I
is
know-
and
I don't know what
everything else
xenogender
to
is.
talk about.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
No.
Basically, like, let's say somebody's gender identity is kind of orbits
Table.
around some inanimate object, for example. That would be an
Table
example.
gender.
Yeah,
Yeah, so,
table gender.
or cloud
So
gender.
is something like that what you guys would consider a valid gender identity?
Personally, yes, I do. Although I don't think any of our argument hinges on on whether or not xenogenders are valid. I think that our argument, our positions are completely coherent without, like, even if you do reject xenogenders, I think the rest of our positions also like continue to make sense. I think it's a different conversation.
Yeah,
so
to bring it back to the truth of the matter, right? If the proposition is, are there more than two genders? We say there are more than two genders. We gave you a list of things. One of those things that we can talk about is brain makeup and whether or not there is some differences in between the chemical, physical, etc. makeup of whatever it is that a person has, right? Now,
I would
see
be more than happy to talk about the neurobiology of this, because the more and more I look into it, the more and more it doesn't support the transgender hypothesis, right? There's plenty of males that have brain makeups closer to females. That's identified as men.
Correct, right? There are some of those there, but they're
Most
also
of them.
different.
No, it's actually most of them.
Most, yeah.
Like most
sorry,
of the
Tony speak,
most of the males who have female brains are homosexual males. Homosexual.
Yeah,
men.
I was just about to ask that as a clarifying statement, so I understand that. But as we explore more of this and more information comes out, then we can also do other different kind of brain scans or whatever else have you, different hormonal levels, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then if science does prove what our position is, and we believe that it does, then it also has the truth utility of the matter to where we can actually be able to pinpoint to be like, yes, this is, you say what you are, we have the proof of it, X, Y, and Z explains it, X, Y, and Z also contribute to ABC, and then we can do it under number of different things, like micro medical assistance.
But if the whole idea of it is that, like, it's essentially about the gender norms, gender roles, societal expectations, the whole 9 yards, right? At the end of the day, like, if that's what it's about, then what does brain chemistry have to do with it, right? What does hormone level have to do with it, or hormone balance have to do with it, right? Because if defining man and woman off of sex is wrong, right, then what would any other science with, like I said, with hormone levels, brain chemistry, anything like that, what does that have to what does that have to do with it? Why is defining man and woman off of sex wrong, but defining man and woman off of other arbitrary physical things is right?
Yeah, so to be clear, I don't think
Ryan.
those are the like the discerning factors about like what makes someone a man or a woman. I do think definitely again, like, most men and women are cis men and women, so generally these words and the way they're used is going to have a lot of overlap with like biological sex presentation. Like, we're gonna, like, these are words that are difficult to separate from those things, which is why oftentimes, like, a lot of gender dysphoria comes from people either not being accepted as the way they're presenting, or not being able to present along those like sexual lines. That's going to be like a combination of all of the gender factors that we've discussed, or like gender dysphoria comes from. I don't really lean much on the male female brain thing. I think it's yeah, I don't care much about that. I think it's probably more likely to be used for like sexist purposes, if anything. And I don't think the science really backs it up.
Yes, that's actually so true. Like, up until like the 80s and 90s, the idea of a sexually dimorphic brain was considered neurosexism. Like, early feminists fought against it too, that, oh, men are more logical because they have bigger brains. And now it's making a wave of comeback with the trans women are women because of this brain, trans men are women because of this.
I think it's actually making more of a comeback due to just really understanding science better and the differences. There's massive overlap between the two.
I don't think that's
the
case.
I think it does.
We've had BNST scans
scans
for how long? We've been able to track the function of the amygdala and the size of the hippocampus for how long? Like, we've been doing this.
But we're talking things like we're talking chemistry, gray matter, size. We're talking all the myriad of different things that we couldn't
Let's let
measure.
CSP wrap this thought up there, please.
But I'm good.
Wait,
Okay.
what, Ryan?
Oh, I was just saying, if you guys could just let CSP wrap up his point, just to mitigate the interruptions. Just because where we are streaming, it can be a little bit clippy when multiple people are talking at once. So.
Gotcha.
But you guys are being great, so I'm gonna try to keep out of it and let you guys continue.
Appreciate it.
Oh, I wrapped up my point. I'm sorry. You probably
He did say that before we kicked it over. So if you want to remind them of your point there, CSP, and we'll carry on.
My point is that while Ryan and I largely agree on these things, there are going to be some things we disagree on. One of these things is probably the biological impetuses of what creates a person or causes a difference in gender identity. These are things that we're going to end up discovering over time and having to be able to pinpoint. That would also play into what Sanvi and Tony are saying about why this can be a truth.
Yeah, well, just to piggyback off that, I would agree that we're probably gonna see more detectable things that can help us make better predictions about whether or not someone will continue to identify as one gender or another. But it doesn't mean that these are like the determinants, like that we're using the like certain brain chemistry to decide whether or not someone's a man or a woman. I think again for me that's primarily a gender identity issue.
Let's kick it over to Anthony before you guys get too much on the pile there.
Hmm?
I don't
Cypher?
think.
No,
Wait,
I
are
think he's
you?
talking to you.
Oh, me?
Oh, Tony
I-
doesn't go by Anthony.
I'm Tony. Yeah, I'm
ever.
Tony. Yeah, I don't go by Anthony. Like ever.
Sorry.
Yeah. What was it? I forgot. I forgot. I was so sorry. I was so strucken. I forgot my point.
Well, maybe if I can maybe pull it back a little bit.
Yeah. One sec.
Like what it seems like the definition of gender that you're all using seems to be it like stems from biological sex. Can you elaborate more on like what like what's the like what are we getting at there?
So
that doesn't
where does it
involve,
so
like,
do
any
you
of
know
the
about
things
the
that we're
etymology?
encompassing?
Do you know about the etymology of the word gender?
Educate me.
So I'm going to try to keep this PG. In terms of the word, like the word sex, right? How we're using it now, we're talking about male and female, right? The other definition of this word, we're all adults, we all know what it means, right? This word wasn't always used in that instance, right? Back in older times when people spoke a little bit just like differently, right? We have other words. We have copulate, we have fornicate, we have procreate, right? The list goes on and on, right? Nearing the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, those words pretty much all fell out of the vernacular, and we started to use sex in replacement of those words, right? So in order to not confuse these things now, in order to not confuse these words, what we would do is, okay, well, sex still means male and female, but let's use a different word so we don't get any confusion, right? And in turn, we use the word gender. Gender, up until very recently, was quite literally, and still is, according to Oxford, defined as one of the two sexes, okay? And so it was literally just done as a linguistic thing, just so we could, always know what we're talking about. And you mentioned a scientific journal or whatnot. If you look in anything science related, pretty much pre 2015, all of them were using sex and gender completely 100% interchangeably, right? And only after a certain point, it's different for different organizations, websites, yada yada. Only then will they start to differentiate. It's like, oh yeah, no, animals don't have gender, right? Or it's like, oh yeah, only humans have gender, the whole 9 yards, right? And sex means male and female, right? The reason why it actually changed to more of a social aspect and less of, just literally male or female sex is because of certain individuals during the mid 20th century. And it actually didn't even pick up popularity until very recently, the better part of the 21st century. So the purpose for it was just so when we use the word sex, it would be just in replacement of fornication. When we use gender, it's just for one of the two sexes, right? And then you have words like man and woman, which is also a gender, but it's also a sex as well, right? And this is replicated in pretty much every intelligent species that we could think of. For example, what's a rooster? What's a bull?
Right,
What's
but
a
that's
cow?
just
Right.
also
The list goes on and on, right? Like it's replicated in multiple other species. So a bull is to a cattle as a man is to a human. It's the same. It's the exact same thing. The logic is right there.
So okay, so there's a lot there. But I think I understand the justification for like this distinguishing between sex and gender historically then from what you're saying, like, although I don't think anymore we really have too much issue with people misunderstanding like the way we're using the word sex when we're talking about like biological sex rather than like fucking. I think people understand generally, like based on context clues, which one's being referred to. And when it comes to like scientific inquiry, I think we can again pretty concretely like use one or the other, or like using biological sex I think is just fine there. But I think we're distinguishing between people's identity, the roles and things that we are examining and categorizing in society. We want to be able to identify these roles and identities. We want to be able to capture this information. Otherwise it's just data being lost to the ether. I think even when it comes to like certain animals, like bull and things, I think oftentimes, I mean, most of the time we'd probably see these animals perform what we'd call like cis roles for them. Like most bulls are probably going to perform traditionally masculine bull roles. But we do also see like I know some lions, some lionesses rather might take on roles of take on more
I know you
masculine
watched my
roles.
debate with Vosh.
I did. I love
You
that
would have
debate. I
had
think
to
you did better
say
than
that.
Vosh, even though I agree with him, by the way.
But see, but no, that's the thing about it, right? Like, like you keep bringing it back to like, oh, how do we talk about the social aspect of it? We have terms for this, like gender norms,
Like
quite literally used to be called sex norms, right? And then we obviously, for the reasons that essentially the reasons that I just explained, like, but now we just call them gender norms, right? Like we have
but
terms,
it's different. It's describing a different thing, right? So sex norms we could probably still use to describe like tendencies that are associated specifically with biological sexes, but then we could differentiate that between gender norms, where we're then including like the social expectations around, and as well as like the different traits demonstrated by people who identify with a different gender. Like, so we're still describing like a more we're having like a more accurate view of the world.
Before this gets to, in my opinion, a bit more off track, I don't understand. Just you can clarify for me. Maybe I'm an idiot. What does this have to do with the existence of that there's more than two genders or not?
Because of the fact that the word, like, we're using the word differently, and when I understand before someone says it, because they I've heard it a million times. Yes, language does evolve and language does change over time, but the key word there is change. Or I'm sorry, the key word there is evolve. Evolution is small changes over a long period of time.
Sure.
Right. That's why I said like late 20th century, late 19th, early 20th. Like it was over a very long period of time where other words for sex fell out of the vernacular and gender came in, right? It wasn't just basically, oh yeah, these words mean this now and this is how we're gonna, and everyone's just gonna say that it is, right? Like it's almost like it's done by force at this point.
No, I don't agree with the by force thing. It's just that I'm going to put a pin on this really quick because I don't think that this is necessarily entirely relevant to whether or not there are more than two genders. The internet just hypersped everything up. Once the internet came into existence, the speed of communication, the velocity of communication exponentially increased as we got more and more people online. And then as that happened, more people being exposed to more ideas gave more ideas weight based on the people accepting those ideas or not accepting those ideas. And therefore that came into existence for all these things. And we're just on hyperdrive. We're not used to it as a species, but that's exactly what's happened. It's not a forced kind of thing.
I would want to ask one thing. Do you guys believe that humans can have a gender identity that is of other animals?
The xenogender thing. I think yeah, like otherkin stuff. So I think what people are saying when they use these identities, at least from my limited understanding of it, it seems that what they're expressing is that they identify strongly with like the energy or vibe that this animal is associated with. And in a sense, like the kind of archetype of a lion, perhaps someone identifies as like lion gender, they identify with like certain traits that are generally associated with lions. And I think similarly, when someone identifies with a certain gender, whether they're trans or cis, they're kind of identifying with some portion of traits that they find are largely associated. Yeah, a vibe. I honestly, I think it's a great word for this. Like, I think the vibes, the energy stuff, it's a little, it sounds a little wishy-washy, but I think it captures what's happening here very well. That people are identifying with these things.
So somebody identifying us with a woman's vibe is the same as somebody identifying as a bull shark's vibe.
Is it the same? I think they're similar concepts.
The same logic.
Similar, yeah.
This comes in.
Does that answer my question though? Like, do you guys believe that humans can have a gender identity that of other organisms?
And I feel like
I don't see why not. I would personally question the social utility of this, but we're not just talking about social utility. We're talking about
decrease harm, same thing.
Yeah. So identity. That's what I'm saying. I don't necessarily understand what the social utility is in this, because when you tell me I don't know, table gender or something. I don't know what that means, right? There isn't a social
Yeah.
definition for that.
And that's
But
the
to the
problem. when
person-
people
Wait,
say they're men
hold
or- when
on,
people
wait,
say
wait.
they're men or women, I don't know what that means.
Yeah,
these
Cypher.
days.
You
I
said
actually
if
kind
you
of agree
identify
with
as a
that,
table, you don't know what that means. Cypher, what is a woman?
I know what a woman is based on the social constructs that we have throughout all of society, and then generally speaking, sex. I don't see how that's incongruent.
That's not a definition.
Sure.
Like that doesn't tell me. Like if I was someone who somehow just legitimately did not know what a woman was, and you just defined it that way, that would tell me absolutely nothing.
Do you
Okay.
know any? Well, I'd probably say like do you know women in your life? You could probably create like an archetype based on that. I think
you
generally
can-
that's what when someone imagines a woman or a man, they're not necessarily imagining the
do you see?
they're not
We
necessarily
don't-
imagining the like reproductive capacities that you guys kind of outlined in the beginning. They're more so they're probably those might be parts of it, but they're generally imagining like a visual of someone with like long hair wearing certain kinds of clothes.
Yeah.
These are going to be things that are contextual given like time and space.
Yeah,
Wait, so you don't
live
see
in a-
anything wrong
you're-
with
you're
the
trying
like
to put-
saying?
You're trying to create a hypothetical where people live in a vacuum, and that makes
That's not a-
defining all language. No, you did. If somebody literally doesn't know what a woman is and has no concept of that whatsoever, then they've lived in a vacuum, right? They haven't existed in society. They don't have any interactions, and defining any kind of language in a vacuum is going to be very difficult.
I mean,
don't see
okay,
how
what
that
if it's a child reading a
response.
book or something? They come across the word, they don't know what it means.
Then we would point to different roles in society, would point to sex, would say generally for me and Ryan, I'll just say for myself because I don't want to speak for Ryan. I would say generally speaking, when we define a woman, we are defining a person of the human species that is female. However, there are other people that identify as a woman that do not represent the sex of the species of female, and they are X, Y, and Z because of ABC. I don't need to continue.
Wait, so if they identify as a woman, that makes them a woman?
Correct.
And then the kid is going to ask you, wait, identify as a what?
And then we would talk about the social
So then you would
ramifications, everything else like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah, I mean, it's a
let
deeper
me
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, wait. So let me back up right quick because I Ryan, when you said like when I asked the question, you said more or less like, oh, like do you know women in your life? You could probably use them to like paint an archetype or whatever, and that would help you define women. Do you see any any problem with that?
Not inherently. I mean, I think that
How would you feel?
generally-
Wait, Ryan, quick
real-
thing.
real
How would
quick-
you feel if somebody said define what a black person is, and they said, oh yeah, you probably know a couple of black people, just make an archetype off of that. Do you think that would be appropriate to say?
Well, I think when we're introducing a concept to a child specifically, we probably like generally, I think we point to examples of that thing in society before we start to have a deeper conversation about what it means, fundamentally to be that thing. I don't think there is like a biological category of whether someone's black or not. I think this is I'm a big critical race theory stan, so I think that I think these are social and legal categories similar to gender in a lot of ways. Generally, again, when we're introducing a concept, we would say, okay, well, what if a kid asks, what is a cat? Then I might point to a few examples of cats, including a lion, including a house cat. And then like when we get to like more, it's going to take more like deeper conversations and deeper understandings to reach like a fundamental truth of the matter about what a cat is. Like, what is the truth of what a cat is? I think it's a complex question that you can't reach very, very quickly.
Feline.
Okay, wait, hold on. With the cat
what's a feline?
example, I think with
That's
anything
obviously-
there are certain necessary conditions, right? Like a cat is a biotic organism at the very least. We can agree there. And maybe you have to simplify it. You don't have to explain taxonomy to somebody that genuinely doesn't understand it. You might simplify it, but that still doesn't mean a cat is just an animal that is a cat. We would never define it circularly. So why is it the case that we would define woman circularly?
I don't see that we're defining it circularly. We're talking about a
You
person
just said
that
a
is
woman is someone who identifies as a woman, though. So it is circular.
a person that identifies as a woman is generally going to have some sort of external look to them or something like that tries to follow, generally speaking, some
Butch
sort of
lesbians.
social
There's certainly
norm.
counter examples to that.
Yeah,
I mean, these
plenty of-
days we have full-grown
I said
males.
generally
peers.
speaking.
Well,
Yeah.
so
We're
then
talking
if there's
we're talking about
counterexamples, then
we're talking
Well,
about a social utility thing. So
I think the word generally there is kind of allowing for those exceptions. But
Yeah.
I would say the way that I usually, because I hear obviously all the time, like, oh, this is a circular definition. I think that the definition, it's being, the words being used in two ways. So there is what someone's identifying as, like the label that they're using for themselves, and then there's a label that they hear and see used for a lot of different people in society, and this encompasses things like what is expected of a woman in a certain time and place, what physical traits people might associate with women, what kind of clothing, what kind of character, like what kind of often hair, but none of these things are defining inherently of what the gender is. These are just things that are all associated with that gender, and then that person is going to come to this conclusion. So it's two different usages, right? It's not
so
circular.
if I told you to imagine gold, for example, you would imagine something that looks shiny, some type of golden color rock looking thing. But truly, gold is defined as by its number of protons, like in the periodic table of elements, right? So just because we might make inferences about something by the way it looks has no bearing on the truth of the matter. Like if I were to tell you to imagine water, we would imagine, a droplet of H2O, but we wouldn't imagine like the chemical compound H2O. But we know H2O makes water. So the way something looks has no bearing, and the way we imagine things and make inferences about things has no bearing on the truth of what it actually is.
Sure, but that then comes to the thing that I said earlier in this conversation, where we are getting more and more experience and exposure and knowledge about biological differences that might account for why people identify with a certain gender over another one.
I find this to be, okay, hold on. Claims require evidence, right? Like, sure, I can, maybe at some point.
I pointed to them and
maybe
they
at some
rejected
point
them.
there will be evidence for that claim to support the idea that there is a neurobiological basis for gender identity that we can point to. But until we have that, I don't think you can use that argument.
I've pointed to a couple of examples. We can talk about that offline. I don't want to monopolize time. Please, Ryan, go ahead.
Sure. Well, real quick to that though, for me, I certainly don't require a brain scan to decide whether or not someone identifies a certain way. I think you can, like, this is just kind of a question of asking them or them telling you, right, whether or not someone identifies as something is going to be largely a matter of self-reporting. You can't there might be evidence supporting that they are doing so, like in bad faith, like if Steven Crowder going to a gym in a dress, like there are reasons to believe that this is an inauthentic gender expression.
I had no idea he did that. That's very embarrassing.
Yeah, he often is.
He's the change my mind guy.
Yeah,
at the table.
So there are obviously like reasons to believe what some people might be being inauthentic about their gender identity, but generally, if we're trying to figure out how someone identifies, that this is a matter of self-report. Like, right, there's no, like, we can't like prove that their brain is doing certain neural firings that make them come to the authentic, sincere conclusion that they identify with a certain thing.
But wait,
what does it mean to feel like a woman?
Wait, hold on. So the problem with self-identification is for let's take Crowder, for example. Yeah, it's pretty obvious to tell Crowder is being disingenuous, right? Like, he's got a history. We know who he is. We know what his thoughts are. Like, he's a content creator, right? Mm-hmm. But what about the instances where that's not the case? Because 99.9% of people are not content creators, right? How would you be able to differentiate the difference between someone legitimately self-identifying and legitimately believing it and just being disingenuous, right? And then the problem with that is like, now the issues that come with people being disingenuous, the outcomes of it are dangerous.
Well,
right?
I think socially, for the most part, and there are a lot of exceptions to this, I think just generally when you're interacting with people in your day-to-day life, the consequences are not really that dire about whether or not you accept someone's identity. Like in a conversation with them, I don't see why you would have to assess their authenticity to decide like what pronouns you're going to use for them. Like if they just say them and then you just go, okay, and then you continue on your day interacting with them as such. I think I would like if someone expects to be or if you expect people to like treat someone as their biological sex, I would be curious about like what the implications of that are. I don't treat all women the same. I treat some women very differently than other women.
So the reason why I asked that is because, like, yeah, in your average example, right? Like, just let's say Sanvi want to identify as a man. I have to talk to Sanvi every day, right? Like, yeah, that doesn't affect me much, okay? But in the extreme examples, right, like where it does get dangerous, like it's completely you need to know, right?
In those situations where it could get dangerous, is it not also possibly dangerous for, we'll say, a person that we 100% know is cis? that they can be also increase these things of danger? Or what if we try to enforce these kind of norms? What about the people that do not fit neatly into that box but are still what you would consider to be a woman? One of the primary examples I can think of this is with bathrooms, and when these bathroom bills started to be passed in 2013, a lot of butch lesbians, not fitting the typical definition of what a woman is supposed to present as, have been forcefully removed from bathrooms across the country by police officers because they felt that those people were putting the women, quote unquote, in danger.
I wasn't even talking about, like, I mean, like, for bathrooms.
Kind of touched on this earlier about how we wouldn't support that. I know Tony specifically said, like, you want to express yourself how you want, like, nobody cares. Like, that shouldn't have any legal, implications or restrictions on how you express yourself. But go ahead, Tony, on your speak.
For example, like, yeah, the bathrooms thing, like, that's a whole bag of worms itself, right? Because sure. We all know, right? You have people like Buck Angel, you got people like Samantha Lux, you have people that are so unbelievably passing. Like, just looking at them, you could stare at them, you could be forced to stare at them for 10 hours, and you never would have guessed that they're not the sex that they present as, right? We know that. Correct. But more specifically, even the more fringe cases, like women's prisons.
I think. Well, with the women's prison situation, right? Wouldn't we want to keep people that are dangerous away from the general population? Shouldn't that be something that's already exists? Cis women rape each other in prison all the time. There's a huge problem with also prison guards raping women. These are all the kind of situations that we have to take into account when we're talking about these things and create. Okay,
so
whatever.
So I just want to make sure. No, wait. Hold on.
Segregated by sex.
Hold on. I just want to make sure. So your justification for what I just said is women rape women, so men should be able to rape women as well.
That's not the justification. I believe that is entirely bad faith.
Okay, so
if I can try to clarify what he was saying.
That's why I'm saying, right? Like
wait, because that was a really extreme suggestion of like what he was getting at, right? What he was specific. Please, what he was saying specifically was that there is a broader problem of sexual assault in prison, and that we need to address this from a different angle than necessarily sex distinction. I think that's what he was getting at. Not
I get that. I get that. Okay. Right. Like, I understand what goes on in both men's prison and women's prisons. Right. Yeah. Everyone has an idea of that. Right. Okay. And that is an issue that needs to be addressed. I agree 1000%. Right. And do you know how you want to know one way that you don't address that? You don't put males in female spaces.
Again.
Well, real quick. If issues about sexual assault, like, those trans women are probably also more likely to be sexually assaulted in a men's prison.
They're not trans women, though. That's the whole point. I'm saying that these are individuals who are being disingenuous, but you would have no way that they're being disingenuous.
Well, you can look at the rap sheet. I mean, okay, so if they're being disingenuous, right, and they're claiming to be a trans woman to get into a women's space, and this is completely off topic, but it has to be addressed, right? They're claiming to be trans because they want to go into a female prison or a women's prison and just have a field day, right? The way to address that is to keep them segregated from the general population after they've gone through whatever it is that the prison system that we have created to address this situation. Before they let her in.
If they get through the whole process,
and then they have to they have to be separated from the general population because their victims were other women.
So, but if trans women are women, why are we treating them differently?
Because of the actions that they took, and not for their identity. They're being treated differently because they are a threat to women because they have raped women or have assaulted women.
Yeah, I would also.
What if they were in prison? Hold on. What if they were in prison for a murder charge against another man? It has nothing to do with women.
Then they are a danger to other people for simply having to be murdered, and they need to be separated from the general population, which is what they do currently in these prisons.
Over to you, Savi.
Yeah, I think prisons should be segregated by sex due to the simple fact of the potential for pregnancy. But that is just my take on that. That's why I don't think trans women especially should be allowed in female prisons. Bathrooms, you pass, I don't really care. Prisons, just like the incidence of sexual assault already, like even with like male prison guards, as you mentioned, and then the incidence of pregnancy, if there's a way to prevent that by sex segregation, we should do that. But kind of getting back to the topic, because I do feel like the applied ethics of this is off topic for is there two genders or not. So if anybody wanted to reel it back in.
Yeah, just to make it no, actually I'm good. Sorry.
Yeah, so I guess I still haven't, again, like, bringing it back, I still don't see any reason that like the word gender shouldn't include things like gender roles, gender expression, gender expectations. It seems like this is like gender is generally encompassing. This is a concept, an umbrella concept that includes all of these different like subdivisions of gender. I guess I don't understand why we would want to remove all of those things from the word gender.
Okay, counter
What
question.
What
Why
is
do we
the
need those
gender of
things?
a person that was, or I'll say two people, what is the gender of a couple people that were born in an island away from any society?
I don't
Like
know,
we
you'd have
would
to
still
ask them,
call
I
them men
guess.
or women. Would say, hey, this man was stranded or this woman was stranded, even though they had no social cues whatsoever. So clearly
Sure.
we use gender differently.
Well, we could use a probability there. Like, I mean, oftentimes we do assume people's genders. I don't think that's always like a bad thing to do. I don't think it's always like insulting. I think generally, like we can, like if these people don't have a concept for it, I don't think they're going to be like particularly offended. They're very unlikely to be people who are experiencing gender dysphoria as well. I don't really see that there's a big problem that comes from just assuming that like again, most people are cis. Like the majority of men are cis men, the majority of women are cis women. So you could probably just assume that and
So you
not
are
run into any
okay with
problems.
assuming people's gender sometimes?
Broadly, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I think,
there's-
but the problem that comes from that is if you assume someone's gender and then they correct you and then you double down, I think that's where problems and like
Yeah.
conflict comes up, especially if you're like an employer or like someone a position like a landlord or something.
and this, in my opinion, would be the opinion of the majority of people, broadly speaking, liberal and left. So, you know, the
Wait,
fringes are
I do
fringes.
not
wait. I want to make sure we're clear. What opinion would be the opinion of most people?
Most people on the liberal and left spectrum, that if you accidentally misgender somebody or you assume someone's gender and it is incorrect,
Yes.
and then once
Yes.
somebody corrects you, then you are continue to misgender them, then you're an asshole at that point. The simple mistake of doing it doesn't necessarily mean that you are an asshole or doing something wrong. It just means you didn't know. We have to give
but I
people
do
grace,
think
and I
that
think
there
most
are
liberal left people do that.
pronouns or identities that the majority of people, like on the liberal left, like you just said, would not respect, such as xenogenders. I know you both concede it, but a lot of people, even on the left that are trans inclusive, do not
Yeah.
believe that xenogenders or neopronouns are valid.
Okay, that's fine.
I disagree with them, but it's okay.
Well, this might be a good time for us to head on over to our Q&A. It's up to you guys. If you had any other thoughts you wanted to flesh out, we can go for another like 10 to 15. That's fine by me. So if not, we can move into the Q&A. How are you guys feeling?
I'm good to move, but
One quick thing. So, Ryan, in your definition of gender, the reason why it was defined the way that it was is to like essentially like be encompassing like for other cultures or something like that.
Well, no, not necessarily. Although I think it does have that effect. The distinction that I would make, I mean, it's literally just observing that people identify as a different gender. Like whether or not we accept that is a different question. Obviously our side does. But like the thing that's being categorized there is gender identity, right? So we're just separating the fact that there are these people who have these differing gender identities that don't align with their biological sex, and it's just categorizing things based on that fact.
if I
of
may
the world.
ask, though, what does it mean? Like, say we have a male, what does it mean for them to feel like a woman?
I think that's going to vary. I think that's going to vary depending on any, like no two trans women are going to have the same answer for that, and also no two cis women
And
are
then
going to have the
that's
exact same answer
problematic
for that.
to make a concept off of that. Like, for example, if somebody believes that I'm a woman because I like washing dishes, another person believes I'm a woman because I don't like washing dishes, yet they're both women, we get into contradictions.
Well, what we get into, it's not inherently a contradiction. It just means that what it means to be a woman for each of them is different, right?
So what is the meaning of the word woman? What is a woman?
Well, again, they're looking around at the way it's used culturally. It's going to be different in time and space. This is why I brought up culture. Like different cultures are going to have different ideas of what a woman is supposed to do, what a woman is supposed to present as. We're going to see this variation, and people are going to reflect on that and then decide what their gender identity is based on what they see around them. And that's if they see less of specific things or more specific things, they might be more or less likely to align with that. But I don't think that matters at the end of the day.
But like, what that doesn't answer the question as to what it means to be a woman.
Or feel like a woman even.
That question has been asked through all of time and space. That has been a question that you can trace all the way back into what is the essence of man, all the way back to ancient Greeks. What is the essence of woman? Ancient Greeks, the Stoics had different answers for that. We don't have a firm answer for it because
the essence of woman is being an adult human female. Like, we can name the essential trait, but you guys can't.
Well, yeah, you're asserting.
Yeah, we do not
you're
agree with your
that.
definition.
But obviously, like a lot of people who consider themselves women, who you might even, it sounds like, consider women in some contexts, A lot of these people wouldn't meet that definition. And I just think when most people
I would
hear
not
the word
consider
woman,
any males to be women.
sure. I think
So,
when most people imagine the word women or woman, they're not imagining the reproductive role you're describing. Like I said
And
earlier,
yep,
the
and
high
when people
picture.
imagine water, they're not imagining the hydrogen compounds. That doesn't mean water is an H2O.
If I tell
sure,
you about it,
but-
wait, if I tell you about a steak, what do you imagine?
A
What kind of
steak?
specific? Yes, but what kind of steak? There are multiple different kinds.
medium
Yeah,
rare
probably-
T-bone, but it
Right,
doesn't matter.
but and you're right. It doesn't matter what you think of. The fact that it's still a steak is the point. Like what I think of when I think of what I think of when I think of a woman doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter if I'm thinking of Megan Fox or Jenna Ortega. The fact of the matter is, I'm still thinking of an individual who is an adult
Yeah,
human
but
female.
this comes back to the social utility argument, and then it goes into the designated. I don't, Sanvi, you're gonna have to correct me or say it again because I don't remember. But the certain expression in the chromosomes, like that's just not how most people are going to operate. If there is a person that presents, generally speaking, as what we consider to be a woman, and they have an XY chromosome, then that person is going to be a woman, right? They're going to
So
be treated
drag
as a
queens are
woman.
women.
No, I don't believe chromosomes determine sex.
And I know, I'm saying that. I know you don't. It's the certain expression thing that we're not going to go into.
Oh, other people believe that?
I'm
Okay,
not-
wait, just
Go ahead.
okay, go ahead. I mean, as a thought experiment, can everybody in this panel, except you, right? Imagine gold. Like just imagine gold in your mind, whatever comes to mind, so be it. Now, I guarantee you guys, you did not imagine 79 protons, but yet the definition of gold is still an element with the atomic number 79, right? So it doesn't matter what you imagined. That is the definition. So it doesn't matter if when we imagine a woman, we don't imagine her genes. It still is what defines a woman.
But that is your definition of it, and clearly Ryan and I disagree with your definition.
Wait. But the definition of woman in Oxford, again regarded as the best dictionary for the English language, is literally an adult human female.
It doesn't matter because we disagree with that definition. We're seeing an
I
evolution
wasn't
of
the
trying
reason-
to
wait, hold
argue
on,
for my
let's-
definition. I was more so pointing out how what you imagine is irrelevant to how we define things and the truth of things,
Correct.
right?
So yeah, so
That
I
is
agree.
what I was trying to point out.
I agree, and I think largely when we talk whether it's water or gold or even most animals that we might describe in this way, I think that what the thing that we're lacking here when we're trying to draw parallels between this and gender is that we're largely talking like when we're talking about like what the defining thing is that makes someone a woman or man, we're talking about gender identity, and there's no identity factor involved in gold. There's no gender identity. There's no identity factor involved in water. Most animals don't have identity of being a particular type of that animal. So I think that we can't draw these analogs quite as clearly because there is no identity factor, which is like the whole crux of what we're getting.
But we can't
And
even
you've already
point to what this
rejected my
identity-
argument about different things that we are discovering now that point to biological factors that would be the essence of truth that create these different genders.
No, that doesn't make sense because you already reject certain biological aspects. So why do you accept other ones?
I didn't reject any biological aspect.
So then why is the definition what's wrong with the definition of man/woman being an adult male or adult
It doesn't
human female?
encompass everything.
It literally does. 100% of human beings who have ever existed are a male or a female. That is not up for discussion. That is quite literally the case.
It's fine.
Yeah,
Like
so
that,
I would
like
appeal
that
to-
is literally how that goes. There is not a human
Yeah.
being that has ever existed out of the 100 billion of us who are neither male nor female or like
Or I mean, for this case, man, woman, boy, girl.
Sure, I would say most I agree with you, like most intersex people identify as like a man or a woman also, like right, like I don't think there's many like non-binary intersex people. I'm sure they exist, but generally these are and most of the time again they're going to be like cis, like they're going to align with like the gender or their like biological sex is going to align with their gender. But obviously this isn't true for everyone.
Right.
And again, like I'm very skeptical of the idea that like most people are. Well, I guess you're saying the issue isn't about what most people think. I think this is where definitions come from, is what most people think. Most people might think like a good working definition for man or woman is adult human female. And I'll say it most men are adult human males. Most women are adult human females. So I think the definition is fair for most people, but when we're talking about like everyone, it seems like we need a slight shift in how we approach this language.
But don't you think it's absurd to assert that your gender changes based on where in the world you are? Like here in America, you might be a woman, you get on a plane, you travel somewhere, you step foot on a different piece of land, and now you're not a woman. Maybe you're non-binary, you're something else? Like,
Well,
isn't,
it's where the personal identification and their interplay between
but
that
then
where
it's
they
not
grew
a
up in
social
society.
construct. It's an interpersonal psychological
No,
construct.
it's still a social
I think that
construct
is- yeah.
because it's an interplay, right? If somebody lives in a vacuum, they're not going to have a gender. But if we don't live in a vacuum, so there's going to be clearly some sort of
I disagree.
inculcation.
I think that people that have been isolated from society have genders.
Well,
I think
we
they might.
disagree.
They might do things that are
or
associated
they
with
can
certain
come up with
gender
their
or
own
not, sure.
concept of gender, and that's going to be completely different than ours.
So gender in y'all's definition is essentially used for utility.
I think all words in general, especially when we're
You
talking
know what
about
I
like
mean.
scientific definitions,
You know what I
we're
mean.
broadly talking about utility.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean.
sure.
Okay.
I don't know if I do.
So
If that's not
if most males and females identify as men and women respectively, then who is it utilized for? Who's the utility for? If it works for 0.6% of American individuals identify as trans, if it works for 99.4% of a population of 300 million, then why would we change the definition?
well, that means there's millions and millions of people who it doesn't work for.
And are we supposed to ignore them just because they don't fit into this box that we want to put people in? No, we create
but they do fit in the box. They just don't want to accept the box.
Well, it seems
that
like
doesn't mean that the box that they live in is wrong.
Well, it seems like we're talking about different boxes. Like their identity is one box. This is the distinction we're making. Like we're just acknowledging that there are people who identify as something other than what their biological sex might suggest. And so there are people who don't. Most people don't. But we're just trying to acknowledge. We're just trying to encompass this when we're tracking these things.
Wait,
if we don't make this distinction, then when we're checking when like if someone's marking their gender on like some medical survey, and we don't know that whether they're trans or not, we can't make a distinction here if we don't differentiate between their gender and their sex. We want to have more accurate data about these people.
You keep saying encompass, but encompass what? Male and female are 100% encompassing. There is no exception to this in the Homo sapiens.
Wait, what is not encompassing about masculine woman to describe a
no,
trans
they would be
man?
included. Yeah, they'd be included under. Oh wait. I'm sorry. So, well, their identity wouldn't be reflected there. So, a trans man might not check man, or I'm sorry, might not check woman on a gender box, but they might check female on a sex box.
Why is the descriptor masculine woman incorrect for them though?
Why is it incorrect? Well, because it's incorrect in terms of their identity. Like they don't identify as a woman. So that part would be the thing that's incorrect.
So it's just gender. You can basically identify there are infinite genders. You could essentially identify as whatever you want. Where do we draw the line there? That's always my end all question.
I don't see a reason to necessarily draw a line.
So I'm a 24-year-old. Wait. So I'm 24. I'm an adult, right?
Yeah.
Do I need to identify as an adult to be an adult?
Well, we're talking about again. So this is where it's going to come back to like we're talking about something like things that are measured, like the number of rotations around the sun that have happened since you were born. And in the way you guys are using gender, perhaps there's something measurable underlined. But like the thing that we're measuring when we talk about gender is someone's identity. Like the way they tell us. If I ask someone what's their gender, they're going to tell me. If they're trans, they're going to say I'm a man or a woman, and that's going to be their gender as well.
But if there are infinite genders, and there's essentially nothing because children and adults they fulfill different roles in society, right? So what would be the problem with an individual identifying as a child?
What would be the problem with that?
Yes.
It depends. It depends on what kind of what they want that to what they want that to include, I guess.
There can be problems in society that are not necessarily problems as far as concepts concerned. I don't want to get into it, but there are people that do identify as children that do not at all interact with children in that way, but they do as adults, and those people exist. And whether or not we want to accept them or not, that's a whole different discussion. But that's what we have.
All right. Well, I think with that, let me get myself off the mute there. I think with that, we're going to move into our Q&A, where Tony said he's asked his end-all be-all question, and I'm sure it won't be, because the Q&A is going to launch lots of more chatter, I'm sure. So keep those questions coming in, and we're going to keep it lively. Now, where we're about to go into the Q&A, do any of you need to grab a drink or take a bathroom break? This is a great time if you need to do that. If not, then let's carry on.
I might actually grab some water. I'll grab
I'll be right back.
Then we're all done. Thanks, Ryan. Because I need to pee.
Someone commented on the live stream. It
Oh,
said
no.
my vodka identifies as water.
I wish that could work. I mean,
Oh
trouble
god.
every once in a while. But yeah, no, we're having a very amicable discussion overall. Everybody, hey, look, it's just me and you, Tony, hanging out here now. So everybody
Oh wow,
else.
everyone else left. That's crazy.
Oh yeah, you're the only. That's the sign of a professional streamer. Everybody, as you know,
Right there.
I choke on my own water, as you can see.
Yeah, I lost my mind. My god, that was hilarious.
I couldn't believe it. I was just like, this is stupid. Uh, yeah, everybody, we're having a really good discussion. I mean, I barely had to inject there. You guys, had a few moments of speaking over each other, but you guys kept it really clean as far as the discussion goes. There wasn't a lot of crosstalk, so we do appreciate that. So before we go into the Q&A, everybody, let's just give a little bit of love for our speakers who came out tonight, and we're gonna wait for CSP to get back and head right into that Q&A. Well, I guess I could read the first one because Sanvi is here. You can hear us, right, Sanvi?
Mhm.
Okay, you're back. Yeah,
Fortunately, we can hear her as well.
okay, and fortunately, we have a positive super chat here. Well, it's not really a chat; it's a fan, and we love that. So, Be Smiley 3 for $2. Queen Sanvi for the win. Don't pull any punches. So you got a fan, Sanvi. How do you like that?
Wow,
They-
that's who would have guessed? Sanvia's fans. That's crazy.
Well,
I
keep
barely.
those.
they like my
Honestly, I barely
intellectual-
like Sanvi. I'm about one good day away from blocking her. So.
My goodness. Well, yeah.
Some people admire my debate skills, Tony, and my intellect.
Okay, listen. Respectfully, we both know that is not most people. Don't play with me. We both know. Okay.
All right. Let's have that debate some other time, you two. And let's continue on with our Q&A. Thunderstorm 999. The idea of an ideology dictating gender to different cultures is racist and a supremacist. What will happen to these cultures if they disagree with your Marxist ideology of a trillion gender supremacy?
Anybody can reject anything that they want. We can't force people to believe anything. We can assert that they're wrong from our perspective, but that doesn't actually change anything. So
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think a lot of times there's this idea of like cultural imperialism, which I think is a real thing, but I think it's often like bastardized to refer to people describing progressive values and how they might apply in a culture that is generally not so progressive. And I think oftentimes like what we're acknowledging is like there are going to be trans people in countries that reject the existence of trans people. There are going to be even tomboys and feminine men in these societies as well, who are completely rejected by the gender roles that are kind of rigidly applied in these societies. And I think suggesting that these people deserve the right to express themselves how they would like to is not imperialist. There are certainly imperialist ways of going about that, but asserting that they have the right to do so is not racist or imperialist at all.
All right. Any other thoughts there from any other panelists?
Okay, wait. Can you say that question one more time? That was a lot. I'm not gonna hold you. That was a lot.
That's all right. It was quite a bit. And I imagine there'll be all kinds of thoughts. The idea of an ideology dictating gender to different cultures is racist and supremacist. What will happen to these cultures if they disagree with your Marxist ideology of a trillion gender supremacy?
What's crazy is that's actually I actually never get into that one, and I'm still not really going to, because whenever you talk about things like that, whenever you go like slightly past skin surface level, then people just start to call you like a conspiracy theorist. But I think you could call it racist, but honestly, we've used that word so poorly in the last 10 years that like it holds significantly less meaning. But what I refer to it as is I refer to it as cultural imperialism. We take our modern ideas and our modern view set on how we look at the world, and we apply that not only to other cultures in the present, but we take that and apply it to other cultures in the past, such as two-spirited gender, by the way. That in no way, shape, or form does two-spirit as well as many other examples that have been brought up. I don't know if Cypher brought them up. I'm just thinking off the top of my head that are brought up. In no way, shape, or form did those fit any regard in modern transgender ideology. But essentially they're just taken, they're put in there as like, hey, look, there's been examples of this in history, but that's not true at all.
All
If I
right.
can maybe just a last note on that, I extend kind of an olive branch. I think I largely agree about the frustration of using things like two-spirit and stuff, although I think these do demonstrate like different categorizations of gender that exist. Obviously, like
Roles.
there are a ton of different tribes and they have very different cultures and very different ideas of what these things meant. And it can often serve to be a little simplistic in terms of Native American people when we try to say that, oh, natives had these concepts. And yeah.
All right, well, let's carry on in live chat. Yeah, keep your super chats coming in, keep them friendly. We're going to carry on. Pointless Poppy, $4.99. Sanvi, show me that someone is true in identifying favor for a specific color in their own mind.
Yeah, that's such a stupid thing. Like, people can lie. Nobody's saying that people can lie. Nobody's saying that we have a way to discern if people are lying to you or not. That has no bearing on if something is true or not, right? Like, I can tell you right now, yesterday I drove my Lamborghini and you would have no way of verifying that. Does that have any bearing on the truth of if Sanvi drives Lamborghinis? No. And it's sad that I have to, like, these people have opinions and vote. People that don't understand the difference between metaphysics and epistemology. Do better.
Okay, to be fair, most people don't know what epistemology is. Like, come on, let's not be elitist. Most people don't know what that word is. If it has more than 3 syllables, they don't know what it means.
Maybe we should give more access to education so more people get the opportunity to learn these distinctions. But I don't think
we live in the digital age of information. Quite literally, anyone has access to all the information they could ever want. And if they don't, and if somehow for whatever reason they don't have like access to internet themselves, almost every county in the country has a library with internet access.
You don't know what you don't know. People I would say probably most people until 2014, maybe 2015, didn't even know what transgender people who transgender people are.
Oh, there were different words
people.
for it. No.
Transsexual, transgender. I'm just saying whatever the term may be. A lot of people didn't know.
I would say that most adults, even prior to 2014, would know words like transsexual and tranny. Right? Think about how big of a name Eddie Murphy was. Right, not as much anymore, but think about how big of a name Eddie Murphy was early 2000s, late 90s. Right, everybody knew about Eddie Murphy in the car with the tranny, quote unquote.
To bring back to my point though, you don't know what you don't know. So if you don't know something exists, you're not even going to know to look it up. That's all I mean. That's all I'm trying to say.
And I'll say the idea that people have, or that people had, and still often have, of these words historically, including the slur you mentioned there, is probably going to be very much informed by the awful media representation that these people were represented with historically. Which is, I mean, if you look to like what's that Ace Ventura bit, or like the punchline was that the person the person he kisses was trans, and there was like all these sorts of that's often a punchline in a lot of media until recently.
All right, well, let's carry on from there. We got some more super chats coming in. Thanks everybody for your super chats, and just want to remind everybody to hit the like button. That does help us out in the algorithm. And we're enjoying our discussion tonight. Everybody's being super polite, and we appreciate that. Pointless Poppy again, $1.99. Thank you. T, what is a two-spirit in Native American culture?
T?
That's to you.
Maybe
Tony.
CSP. Is that for him? Since
No. I'm
maybe.
T. I'm T.
Oh.
Two-spirit is basically just, from what I understand, I don't know if it's males and females, but from what I believe, what I think I get is basically males who fulfill female roles. TLDR.
More or less, it would depend on the culture, and it is an amalgamation term created in 1990-ish or so. There wasn't an actual term for it prior to then, from what I was able to research on this topic.
Yeah, that's what I was seeing as well. So basically, kind of full circle back to the cultural imperialism. We take things that don't fit into our...
This was created by Native people themselves in a conference. So I wouldn't say that's cultural imperialism whatsoever.
But even like even calling it like a like saying it's basically like a native thing, like the native two-spirit, like the natives were a very large, expansive, and diverse group of people. There were multiple groups of natives. So it's like, so instead of saying like native, like saying native, basically, it's one of those things where it's like it the way that I see it is it's like how I mentioned earlier, like conflating different terms to try to make the point stronger. It's essentially saying things in a way that makes the point better, right? So instead of saying specifically what native groups this was, right? And in order to just boil it down to, hey, this is just what I don't know where exactly, right? But hey,
Sure.
this is the beliefs that this one or two specific groups in the deserts of Arizona held that were Native Americans, right? Instead of saying that, they just say natives, which expands over 2 entire continents with a population of over
Sure.
120 million people, right? So it's like, oh yeah, the natives believe this, and it's like, okay, yeah, the natives, but how many is that? Like, it could have been 4,000 people who believe this, right? Like, whoop-de-doo.
Yeah, it was a what is it, neologism? I can't pronounce that. Whatever it was, neologism, I think is what it is. And it was created specifically as a pan-Native American term in order to encompass these various ideas that were different between the different cultures, because they all shared similar aspects, more or less. So
Yeah, I was just going to read this. I pulled up a Wikipedia article. I think it has a good like introduction. It was like two-spirit, two-spirit or 2S, or occasionally two-spirited, is a modern pan-Indian umbrella term used by some indigenous North Americans to describe Native people in their communities who fulfill a traditional third gender or gender variant, ceremonial and social role in their cultures. I think that's but
Can I
yeah,
ask a
I'm
question?
often
I
frustrated
kind
by
of
how
meant
it's
to
used in
ask.
debates, but go ahead, Sanvi.
I kind of meant to ask this one earlier, but do y'all believe that somebody could be a man and woman at the same time, identify as both?
I mean, there are some agender people that do that. So,
but agender means
is
neither.
lack of agender,
Yeah.
from my understanding.
Sure.
I should say,
think there's.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, for me, I think there's room in my understanding of these things for like a dual gender identity. I don't know how common this would be, but I think it's possible. Sure.
Okay. Yeah, just was curious.
Also, it's like, yeah, it was made at the conference, but the term was first made in English and then translated to a Native American language.
Right. Yeah.
What?
Well, you have to. I mean, it was in the 90s, right? So most people would have come up with a new term, or going to try to have a shared language and then translate it into, I don't know, whatever the majority of people there were. So.
I think most Native American people in the 90s probably are also learning English. So
yeah. I don't see this as a problem, simply because there are these terms, which I brought up, two of them, and then another one from Angola, that encompass these kind of concepts that aren't necessarily going to fit into the binary of gender that we were arguing with.
All right, well, let's move on with our super chats and keep them coming in, everybody, and we'll keep the conversation rolling. Pointless Poppy 499, once again not referring to somebody's name, just a letter, which is S. So to you, Sanvi, the point of mentioning the historical use of non-binary terms is to show that this show gender is not a description of biology. Break this down just a little bit. The point of mentioning the historical use of non-binary terms is that this shows gender is not a description of biology. Oh, just one S away from working out.
Yeah, I don't think that necessarily follows that because previously gender was a description of something else that is now true. Like, for example, like people back then didn't even believe in a heliocentric solar system, and I'm supposed to take their word for gender. Like, I'm sure you don't believe that when it rains outside, it's God putting his wrath upon us. But these people did believe that. So I think that the more information we have and the more that we can think about this logically, the less and less evidence points to the fact that there is more than two genders and a such thing as a gender identity.
Well, even if you want to accept that as a definition, we can also acknowledge that there is wisdom of the ancients. Just because they didn't understand a concept fully does not mean that they could not intuit it or figure it out through just straight exposure to different things.
Wait, hold on. Just one really quickly. Was it you, or maybe I am wrong?
I did say that you cannot rely on intuition in order to get truth.
Okay,
I am not.
There we go. So I'm going to reject that as well.
I would say.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I would say I think this is what the question was getting at. I think they're suggesting that, like, not necessarily that we should look at these historical usages of third gender ideas as like this shows that we should now use it this way. I think what they're saying is it exemplifies that there have always been variations that are in contention with this traditional idea of there being two genders. There's been people historically for forever. I mean, trans people have always existed. There's always been lots of people who are gender nonconforming in various ways. There's always going to be people who don't fit into this traditional gender binary. I think that's really what the question's trying to get at. At least that's the way I felt it. Yeah.
And that was my point. But to also just one final point, just because something is old and it comes from people that we no longer agree with doesn't mean that it also is not true. We're seeing evidence with traditional Chinese medicine that are proving to be there's healing properties in certain kind of elements in plants and things like that we're also seeing now that we have the technology to actually examine it, that hey, there was actually something to this.
Yeah, so I
mean,
don't think
yeah,
it's
of course.
100% either way. It could be true, it could not be true what people believed historically. That's up to us to debate. That's why I think citing historical evidence and conceptions of gender doesn't really make sense to me. But that's
Also, to one of the answers, I forgot what somebody had said, but I couldn't really find a way to get this like during the debate. I completely reject the idea. I like 100% reject the idea of gender identity.
yeah, me too.
The only instance in which I don't reject it is in the same sense that like I wouldn't reject racial identity, right? Like I'm black, right? But like it doesn't matter if I identify as black or not. Like I just simply am, right? And the only instances where this ever comes into play is with certain groups like Dominicans. You ask Dominicans, they can be midnight purple. They will not accept if you call them black. That's fine. There's no really reason to. Most of the world doesn't see race; they just see nationality or ethnic group.
Yeah, American race is like a very particular idea of, or like a very particular version of racialization. I even if you like reject gender identity, I mean, I think everyone here acknowledges there are people who have gender identities that don't align with their biological sex, and I think that's really all that's being said.
No,
I mean, yeah, no, like I acknowledge that, but if we
masculine
reject
women,
like if we like I acknowledge
well,
that, right? But like if we reject the idea
sorry.
of a gender identity, then it doesn't really matter what they identify as.
I want to engage with what Sanvi just said about like masculine women. Like this doesn't contradict at all because we're talking about like their biological sex. Like a masculine woman still has the biological sex of female, or the masculine cis women you're referring to still have biological sex of female and still have the gender identity of women.
I was referring to transgender people. I just see them as masculine females or something like that, feminine males.
All right, let's carry on from there, everybody. Yeah, I see that our Discord has been tagged in the live stream. So if you enjoy debates like this and you want to get a hold of me, I think Sanvi, you're hanging out in there too. I'm not sure. I thought I saw you were poking around in our modern day debate Discord. But yeah, get in there and check it out. We got 24/7 debates. You can practice your skills and get yourself debate buff so that maybe you can come on the YouTube show here and have fun like we are tonight. So let's carry on with our super chats, everybody. Do 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 and down. Oh, I'll get the old copyright going. Moyet Morgan, $5. Sanvi and Tony, to what gender does a massless god identify under your concept?
Oh my god!
I saw this comment
in the
comment when I pulled it up, and I just had to really take a minute and just like reflect on the fact that somebody really typed that out and said
thought it was a gotcha.
And thought it was a gotcha because at the very beginning of the debate, I know Tony defined gender something along the lines of the human sexes or
one of the two sexes
of sex. So God is not human. That concept doesn't apply. The same way gender doesn't apply to rocks because rocks are not human.
And honestly, no, because listen, I'll entertain the question, right? So God in the sense of the Father and the Holy Spirit doesn't have a gender. God in the sense of Jesus, male, man, easy. Like it's such a terrible question. Like that is honest to God, like nothing to anyone else, like to Cypher and Ryan, y'all been cool, right? I don't know where the other Ryan lies politically, but one thing that I've noticed is in a lot of the discussions that I've had in a lot of debates, when it comes to, I'm not even on the right, like I'm not even a conservative individual, right? But everyone always just says that I am just because they, identity politics, what's it called? When group, whatever, tribalism, that's what I was looking for. Is one thing that I've noticed is that whenever I'm talking to people on the left, whenever they respond, a lot of them, they respond with the worst possible the worst possible meaning that misconceptions. They don't understand what's coming out of my mouth or out of people on the right's mouth, and then they argue against that. It's like they have no idea what they're talking about. There's no way the person who donated that has any idea of what people like Sanvi and I legitimately believe by asking that question, because we already answered the question. It wasn't like this was asked at the beginning. No, this is like halfway through.
Sure, like those people are like creating like a kind of caricature of a conservative and arguing with that
Yes,
person.
it's literally the worst the worst and lowest IQ versions of a straw man. That's what it is. I'm not saying that y'all did that, obviously. Y'all were fine, but like the like people in the comments, the individuals that I debate on TikTok, it's just like I say one thing, they're like, oh, so what you're saying is, and my rule of thumb, if the statement is ever said, so what you're saying is, they weren't listening. 90% of the time, they're not listening.
All right, let's continue on from there. See lots of questions coming in the live chat. Make them into super chats and they'll all get asked, sans our members, of course. Let's carry on. So, Gold Mercer, $10. Going back to the gold example. Or no, Gordon Mercer. I got to get my glasses, I think, or just make YouTube a bit bigger. There we go. Boop, boop, boop. Gordon Mercer, not Golden Mercer, but maybe you are. This debate devolved into, can cisgendered people identify with the other gender? I believe gender is a spectrum and not a binary. And this debate in no way answered the more than two genders question.
Was that specifically for?
I'll just jump in because I think I tried to do that in my opening. So if you missed the opening, just rewind.
I thought we had a decent discussion on it.
Yeah, the reason why the question is impossible to answer because we that at the end of the day, like the words are just not defined the same.
Yeah, I will say that the reason that a cisgender person couldn't necessarily identify as another gender is because that isn't like what it means to be cisgender is that you identify with the gender you were assigned at birth. And what it means to be transgender is that you identify as a gender other than the one you were assigned at birth. So that's like all like these are like it encompasses all people, like that you're either cis or trans. I mean, although there are some people who are who would qualify as trans under this definition who don't identify as trans, so there's some nuances there. But in general, like these categories are just referring to whether or not your gender identity aligns with like the sex you were assigned at birth.
Also, another thing, I completely reject the idea of the term cisgender. I think it's the dumbest possible thing.
Okay,
I agree.
Like it doesn't
It's
like the term itself doesn't make sense.
Coffee. The coffee is already caffeinated unless you want a decaf.
Yeah, that's like you don't like we don't do that with any term, right? Like let's say you have someone who goes to school for 4 years. They go to med school. They do their residency for 4 years. They get their MD. What are they? They're doctor, right? What do you call someone who hasn't done that? You don't.
Yeah, so I guess if we're, I mean, I kind of understand what you're getting at with your definitions, but I don't think it makes sense under a broader understanding of like differentiating sex and gender. Like again, obviously we're talking about the fact that there are people who identify as a gender other than the one they were assigned at birth, and we categorize these people as transgender, and there are people who don't. There are people who, like I believe everyone on this panel, who identify with the gender they were assigned at birth, and those people would be identified as cisgender. It's really that simple.
Wait, not Ryan on the far right, but Ryan the host. Are we allowed to ask questions, or is it only from the audience?
I mean, we are in Q&A, but I'm the type of host that I don't mind if it goes a little
I do have to go in
cool
like
host.
5 minutes. Is that okay? Can we get the questions?
Okay.
Sure, if you got questions after you want to ask, let's try to get through these. Especially now that I've gotten them blown up to 200%. Yeah.
Okay, we keep going.
I'm gonna ask these questions now. All right, let me get over here. That was our first super chat from Gordon Mercer. Now that I've got them all blown up, I can see them great. So, Steel Stargazer, $5. What is a lesbian? How does a lesbian differ from a trans woman?
I think trans.
No,
gender and
wait,
sexuality are different.
wait. I was gonna say Sambi, let him go first. Wait. I want to see what they had to say.
Yeah. So a lesbian is generally what like sexuality labels. People are signaling like what gender like type of people they're attracted to based on their own gender identity. So most people who are lesbians identify as women and are saying that they're interested in sexual and romantic relationships with women. But there's obviously a lot of variation in that. There are like he/him lesbians who are historically a bit of a wrench in that, perhaps. But I think there's plenty of room for sexuality to be complicated.
All right, well, let's try to keep moving through. Sanvi, you had some thoughts there?
Yeah, that's it. That was fine. That was wrapped up well.
To quickly answer it, I don't think that sexuality And let me say it again. I don't think that sexuality has anything to do with gender identity. It's like the word sex is literally in the word.
Well, we have
Like
another.
sexual orientation, sexual preference. These sex is the word.
All right, well, we'll continue on there. We have another fan super chat. Young Old Boy says for $2 Canadian, this Somvi lady is an assassin. Absolute workshop.
I
So you
saw
got
that
another
comment.
fan.
I had no idea what that meant. I saw it, and I was I don't know what that means.
I think they said that I think what they mean by that is that you're putting in the work, I guess. That's what
Thank
I
you.
can
Thank
gather
you.
out of that. So, you know, we love the fan super chats. They're always nice to see. Aussie Gold, your member super chat. This was from Wolf, and he was asking a lot in the live chat. He really wanted to know, would Ryan and CSP date a trans woman?
Yes.
Potentially.
All right.
No. No.
Well, everybody's almost answered. You, Tony?
That's crazy. I'm not gonna hold you.
Okay, we'll try to continue on.
Based off of what I just said, that's crazy.
Well, let's try to continue on for the sake of Sanvi getting some more of her voice in here on these questions that are directed to her. Pseudonym, $10. Respect to Sanvi for being respectful. She knows men can't get pregnant despite mental disability, i.e. Ryan, CSP, tell us how men have a uterus using X amount of genders, chromosomes to make your case, and how.
There are these people who we identify as trans men. It's perfectly consistent with everything we said so far that these people exist. They are biologically female. They have like a uterus, and they identify as men. And these people can get pregnant. So that doesn't mean cis men can get pregnant, obviously, but these men can. It's really that simple.
I agree with Ryan. I think the question was worded in a way that we couldn't answer that. So I'll just defer to him.
Alrighty. Well, let's continue on there. Yep, going on. Pseudonym again. $2. My gender is Terminix. CSB, how do you respond to this?
Terminex? Is that what they said?
I don't know what that means.
It's a Terminator company.
I don't know what that means. You'll have to explain it to me, and then we can talk about it.
I think Terminex is a Terminator company.
Oh, you mean like
like a pest control company to get rid of termites?
Oh.
I mean, it's a good question, but again, I don't know what that means from a social perspective because we haven't defined those terms. So you have to tell me.
Terminex it's a pest control company. It means
but I don't know what that means
as a company
in terms of gender, which is what we're talking about. So
yeah, I thought it was like a Arnold Schwarzenegger thing, and
it does tell you, right? Like socially, like pest control companies like serve a function in our society and in our culture to get rid of pests, right? So that means that, you know, like they're identifying as that they get rid of pests,
cool,
rid of termites.
All right, if that's what they mean by it, then sure, you go around and kill insects. Congratulations.
All right. Well, I guess better than identifying as a Terminator, right? That's I thought we were going right for the 80s reference and going straight Arnold. Anyways, Pointless Poppy, $4.99. So Sanvi, y'all know, yeah, this is another one from Pointless Poppy. Sanvi, you know, historically, gender is not always referring to biology. What is your reason for no longer using gender to describe something psychological?
Yeah, because I think we already have other terms to describe these psychological traits that people might have. Gender is generally, I think even other people in this panel accepted use interchangeably as the human conception of sex. So to describe psychological states, we could have somebody just being a feminine male, right? Their brain or something typically allows them to like things typically associated with females. I don't think that has any indication on their gender. But yeah.
Also, what's a rooster?
I don't know.
Another word for cock, right?
A rooster is a male chicken, right?
Okay.
I think specifically an adult male chicken, it'll be consistent with man. Is that the chicken's gender?
I don't think chickens have a concept of gender identity, but I'm open to.
I didn't say gender identity. No, I didn't say gender identity.
Yeah, I know, but as I've said a bunch, like my understanding of like what somebody's gender is going to be informed by what their gender identity is. But I did want to something Sanvi mentioned, but that like historically these terms have been used very interchangeably. I agree, especially in a lot of scientific literature. And in fact, the article that I linked earlier is specifically trying to address the problems that arise from this historic conflation of these two things and trying to address that by differentiating them in the future.
I also acknowledge that in my opening with the Webster dictionary definition. So
All right. Well, with that, we'll just check in with you, Sanvi. Did you have to go still, or you have
No,
any
it's
more
okay.
time?
I'll stay a little longer.
Okay, well, we're glad to have you. So, Robin Page, $5. Women and men are historically and colloquially defined as adult human biological female and male, respectively. Why should that change?
that goes to us. I don't know who wants to go first.
Well, I
Wait.
think that is for your side. So, Ryan.
Yeah, I
you
mean, it
got
has to
thoughts?
be.
Well, I know.
Sorry, can you read it again? I missed part of it. I was reading something.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I know the live chat's very lively there too as well, so we might be keeping an eye. Robin Page, $5 asked, women and men are historically and colloquially defined as adult human biological female and male, respectively. Why should that change?
Oh yeah, I said something to this effect a few times. I'm very skeptical of the idea that these have always been and always are like colloquially used to just refer to biological sex. It seems like generally people have a lot more things when they're using these words. Like they're often referring to like roles that these people might engage in. They're often referring to presentations that these people are likely to engage with. It seems like there's a lot more involved than just their biological sex. So I kind of reject that question or
Yeah.
the framing. Yeah.
I actually can. No, sorry, Cypher, you got
No,
it.
go for it. Go for it. You spoke up first.
So actually, it wasn't only used in a quote unquote biological sense. Like, yes, there is a social aspect, in which case we do use both man and woman, right? So let's say you're doing something, I don't know why. Let's say you drop your pickle on the ground, I don't know, right? And you as a grown man start crying, like bawling, sobbing, right? And somebody looks at you and they say, man up, right? They're not telling you to be more of an adult human male. That doesn't make sense, right? What they're saying in that instance is essentially be more masculine, right? Or if something I'm just stay with me, right? Let's say a woman doesn't wash the dishes in her house, right? And she's like, wow, you're not acting like a woman, right? What they're not saying, oh, act more like an adult human female. They're saying act more feminine, right? So in this instance, it's like, yeah, we accept that, right? Like that's not a crazy thing to say, right? Like everyone has heard things like that before. But the problem with it is like that's the instance, right? It's just saying act more feminine, act more masculine, right? But it's just an easier way of saying, man up versus I don't need you to act this way. I need you to act more in a way that is typically associated with the masculine things in our, like, that's too much. It's too wordy, right? So it's conflated there in that instance. But the reason why this still doesn't really support the transgender ideology in the instance that I just gave is because masculinity and femininity are still associated with both man and women. But the fact that you can have masculine women, feminine men, or you can have masculine trans women. God, this is a lot. The fact that you can do all of these things, it kind of like rejects that idea, right? It would go against it.
Yeah, to Tony's point, I think saying, man, this is a lot is exactly why we're having the language evolve like what you're doing in order to be able to put a fine point on it for people to understand exactly what we're talking about.
Whenever any human being says man up to anyone who's not quite literally a child, we all know what we're saying.
I know what they mean, but you're saying that there's the existence of trans women, right? So we're going to end up having these different terms in order to understand the world in which we actually live in. Yeah,
but trans women is the term, right? But like I'm saying it goes against the ideology, not against trans women, but it goes against the ideology because by saying man up, it's just saying be more masculine.
I don't consider it to be an ideology, but that's for another debate.
The fact that a man can be a woman is an ideology. Like that is not a widely accepted belief in 90% of the world. South America, Africa, most parts of Asia, West Europe, Middle East, right? Like most of the world does not accept this idea, does not accept this ideology, and they will violently go agaest it.
And just
so it is an ideology.
True. Those people are at risk of extreme violence. Yeah. I agree.
Right. So because of that, it is an ideology, right?
What's that CSP in here? He's trying to say something, guys.
Sorry.
It's fine. Just to answer the question, though, the reason that these terms are evolving is because we're experiencing a need for social utility in these terms to explain a human condition, which we did not have proper language to explain in the past. So whether or not a culture is violently going to be against these things doesn't necessarily matter whether or not they're true. It matters of if they are true and if we need to have a social utility for the language to explain them.
We need a social utility for 0.6% of the population.
Yes.
Yes.
So 0.6% of so essentially we
it
have
could be
to change
one
everything.
person.
No.
One person, and it would still be true.
But it's not.
So 0.6% of the population, because they feel as though the rules need to change, even though they do fit under the rules, they just don't like what the rules are. That means we
Yes,
need to change
because
it.
we live
So
because
if
because we need to be
0.6% of the
accepting.
population, so if 0.6% of the population, like we're adults, we're not even going to count the minors. Let's say it's 0.6 who are adults, right? Start whatever they say, you have to go with, right? Just because the 0.6 said it.
It's not it's not a have to. It's whether or not we're going to expand this language to serve these social utility functions. There's millions upon millions of people that these binary terms do not necessarily apply to. And so if we're going to accept that they're okay, well, Ryan and I reject that, and that's why we're trying to answer the question.
And those people will tell you that they don't, that they will reject it. And in fact, I also say that in a lot of the places you mentioned, they're like, not all of these places like have cultures that all reject trans people. Like some of these places do have acceptance of trans people to varying degrees. Trans people definitely exist in all of these different places as well. So.
All right, well, let's carry on if you guys are done with that one there, unless you had any other thoughts. I mean, I didn't want to
actually, one more thing on that. When we talk about the man up thing that came up a few times there, it seems like the language that we're proposing or that we're supporting that's already been proposed and largely implemented is language that gives us tools to talk about like what people are actually saying when they say man up, that they are saying something more than be a biological man, which obviously you both agree with. I think we're just saying they're referring to gendered expectations and roles when they say this.
All right, let's carry on there from our super chats. Back on up and keep them coming in, everybody. I see Tony's just taking a little step out there, but oh no, he's not. He's just grabbing something under the desk. That's all right.
I think my dog's got something on her. I'm still here. I can hear you.
Oh yeah, no, you're good. You're good. See, that's that professional live stream energy we were talking about before. Man must have a bottle under the desk or something. That must be. I'm kidding, Tony. I'm just picking. All right, synonym, $5. Ryan, when you say gender trans binary, does it take male and female to make an argument? Like, why not sponge or yeast? Gender as agender / non-gender. That's a little wordy.
That made no sense.
To be charitable, I think they're getting at xenogenders.
Maybe. If they like, can you read that one more time? And I'll try to respond to it. It was at me, right?
Yes.
So he's basically, I think the real. I'm kind of hyper analyzing it here. I think the real creme de la creme of his question is: does it take male and female to make an argument for gender trans binary? So do you need those foundational things? I think as far as like, I think they're saying, do you need that as a foundation to make that argument?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. In terms of when we say cisgender and transgender, we are referring, I mean, we use the terms like gender assigned at birth, but broadly, that's going to be like sex assigned at birth. Like they're referring to like sex, their biological sex. And if that is, if their biological sex and their gender identity are in contrast with how we might often perceive these things to be aligned, then they would be trans. Like if they identify with a gender other than the one they were assigned at birth, they are going to be transgender. So we do like sex, biological sex absolutely plays a part in these categories. So yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts on that before we move on? All right. Let's carry on then. Angel Quiles, $5. What is a chair? Now I can
knew
tell
it,
you.
and I'm ready. And can they see my screen?
Oh. Oh, this came out of somewhere.
People act like I don't think this stuff through. No, it's the stupidest objection when gender theorists are like, well, if you can't define chair, then I don't owe you a definition of man or woman. Well, firstly, you do, because you're the one making the claim that trans women are women and trans men are men. So when you make a claim, you should at least be able to describe what you're referring to. Second of all, we do have an obligation to describe politically significant terms, such as true of like tax, citizen, right? These are important things to know what we're talking about if there is going to be legislation passed on it, if there is going to be used in political context. So the chair objection doesn't work. Also, I did make a slide defining a chair, but that's irrelevant. There are still necessary and sufficient conditions.
Well, that was very very ready of you with the screen share there. I think they might have seen your. I think Zombie might have seen your question a little sooner than when I asked it. That was very prepared. I was gonna joke and say, you know, as somebody who spends a lot of time with a chainsaw, whatever I've cut at waist level is now a chair that I'm gonna eat my lunch on. All right, let's continue on. Keep your soup chats coming in.
Sorry. Last thing on that, I guess I would agree that chair is a bad analogy for gendered terms. I don't think it's a good comparison. Doesn't involve any sort of identity. Again, like we said, with like gold and water and all these things, there's no identity component.
All's good. Yeah, no problems there with that little the afterthought there. We got a $10 super chat from Pete, who's a member, and that's his first super chat. But I don't have a question, Pete. So put it in the live chat after you see this, and I'll try to get it for you. Young old boy, $2 Canadian. A workshop on how to debate and use rhetoric. Duh. I don't know who you're coming at with that, young old boy. Sorry.
Wait, he asked another question earlier, didn't he? Who was his question to?
I think it was in Absolute Workshop, and said that to Sanvi. That was a compliment. A workshop on how to debate and use rhetoric.
Oh, okay. For me.
Yeah, I think they're once again giving you a compliment, saying that you've given a workshop on how to debate and use rhetoric.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And a pleasant conversation. Yeah.
I'm
Hi.
that guy, man. $2 euro to all four of you. Atheist, theist, deist. So we'll start with you, CSP.
I'm an agnostic deist. I typically believe in the clockmaker kind of thing, but with a Christian lens.
All right, and Capone? Tony?
He doesn't know what that means.
No, sorry.
I don't know. No, I don't know. I was thinking about that. Sorry, theist.
Theist? All right.
Yeah.
And Ryan?
I generally consider myself atheist. My big problem with religion comes from like people assert that they know like that there is a creator of the universe. They know what that creator of the universe wants, and they try to use that to impose things on other people. I think that's a very bad line of reasoning. So that's my problem with religion generally.
All right, and Sanvi?
Yeah, I'm a theist.
All right. Well, there you go. Everybody's answered that question. That was pretty concise. Nikki for $5. That's your first super chat, Nikki. Thank you so much. Tony, please look up the etymology of cis and discuss. Oh
Cis
no!
means on
you
the same
killed
side of
Tony.
that's the etymology. The
Oh my.
presumption is that there is a such thing as being on the opposite side of that you're presupposing.
Oh my God, it's such a terrible question because what they always do is I've heard someone bring up like the transatlantic rise or cisatlantic yada yada, but no, they mainly bring up chemistry like in terms of molecules. You have cis molecules and trans molecules, but again, at the end of the day, the argument it still falls apart, right? And the reason why it falls apart is because you don't define the standard, right? The standard just is. Right, you define things that move away from the standard, right? Like again, I'll literally use what I said earlier. What do you call someone who does not get their MD? You don't, right? But someone who gets their MD, you call them a doctor. We don't do this for any other word, right? Like I don't understand the fact that it wasn't a word until what 1994 or 1995, and it wasn't even put in the dictionary until like 2014, right? Like there's quite literally no reason for cisgender to be a thing. Right, like there's no a cis woman or a cis man. Like there's no reason for it. You just have man and woman. You just have men and women. And if you want to be a trans man or trans woman, that's fine, right? But that doesn't mean like. And I'm actually glad that we brought it back because I had a question about that. Cypher, Ryan, how do y'all feel about people saying that cis is a slur?
I think it's cringe.
Anything can be twisted to be a slur if you have enough oomph behind it. So if somebody is using it as a slur, then it is a slur, but that doesn't make the word inherently one. And I think we can point to other things of this nature. Like I can say that someone is ignorant, and if I use that, that's not a slur. It's just a statement of fact. They don't know what they are. They don't know what they don't know, right? They're ignorant to the knowledge. But if I say, oh, you're an ignorant asshole, then that becomes a slur. The ignorant is a qualifier to the fact that they're an asshole, and then yada, yada, yada.
You said it's not inherently like cis wouldn't inherently be a slur. What does it mean to inherently be a slur?
The typically way that people use the language, it's not inherent, it's language, so it's going to be amorphous. Like, just bear with me on this. But a slur, like I said, I'll just bring it back to the ignorant thing. If you call someone ignorant, is that a slur? Generally speaking, no, right?
Okay, so
we're just
no.
we're just describing a person's state of being. We're not putting any sort of moral weight to it, right? Same thing with cis. If I say that I'm a cis man, that just means that I am a man that identifies with my biology, which is male. There's no slur to it. But if I say you're a fucking cis piece of shit, well, then it can become a slur because it's being used as an insult.
I would say for any word that the only thing that determines it as a slur is if the group of people that it's used against determine that it's a slur.
But not everybody that is cis considers it a slur. So that's why it's not inherently.
Not every black person considers the N-word a slur.
Correct.
But it is a slur, right? The one for Japanese people.
I think the ER one is a little different than the A one. Wouldn't you agree?
12% of a population of 300 million people. There are definitely some black people who.
But it's not inherently one.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, if most cis people don't like the word and they hate it, right? Then logically, right? Like but
I think most cis people are kind of fine with it. I think most cis people don't care that much about it.
Most cis people consider it to be a slur.
Well, one, I don't even think that most people know what it means. But two, like using the exact same logic as, if one person doesn't like this thing, then we should stop using it. We all know that there are quote unquote cis people who don't like the term, so we should stop using it.
I mean,
using the exact same logic as the 0.6%. Oh, that means that now we can change what these words mean and how everything means. Then if the 99.4%, if there is even 10% of that who don't like it, then we gotta stop using it. No.
I feel like this is an appeal to numbers, but the logic does kind of track.
I'm sorry to interject, but I do have to go. Are there any questions for me specifically so I can just make sure they didn't waste their money or anything that can answer them?
Sure thing. Let me just comb through here already. Pointless Poppy asked, Sanvi, we already have a word for sex / chromosomes.
We don't have, yes, that's true. We have female, but we don't, and male. We don't have a word for the human conception of sex unless we use gender. Like, what is an adult female human being? A woman, right? But we have a word for an adult female lion, which is a lioness. I don't know why the same wouldn't be true for our own species.
And cow. List goes on. By the way, but we didn't get back into it. By the way, rooster is definitely a chicken's gender.
Yeah, I was gonna say, before you guys do get back into it, Sanvi, if you want to take a minute to kind of give a closing thoughts before you sign off.
No, I don't want.
Sorry, what was that?
No, it's okay. I can just answer the questions. I feel like Tony's got this.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, that was the
you have
only
faith in me
question
now?
that was directly to you. So if you didn't want to close out for a minute, then we'll give you a round of applause in the live chat there. Thanks for coming out, Sanvi, and we'll definitely look forward to having you next time. All right.
Thank you, guys. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Peace out, Zombie.
Yeah, you as well.
Zombie. Thank you.
And if I'd love to talk. Oh,
take care.
I was gonna say I'd love to talk again. I'll bring a PowerPoint. But
well, I'll get us all fixed up here, fellas, and we will continue on with some of these questions here.
Oh, well, while you're doing, I wanted to read, there's a definition of a slur, right? And it's like the insinuation or allegation about someone that is likely to insult them or damage their reputation. I don't think categorizing someone as cisgender does any of that. So, yeah.
Unless they determine that it does.
I mean, I guess there are ways that it could be used like that, but I don't think most people are using the word that way. So I'm not that concerned about it. That some people might feel that it is.
Which one is more important when it comes to language, the intention or the perception?
I don't think it's a one or the other game. I think it's going to be a mix, a combination, and as well as other factors. I don't know. I think the category that cisgender is applying to is people who identify with the gender they were assigned at birth. This is just what it's referring to. There are people who don't, and those people are considered transgender. There are people who do. Those people are considered cisgender. It's really that straightforward. There's nothing more to it. You can assign more stuff to it. Some people do. Some people use it with more stuff around it. But in general, that's all it means. So.
To just put a cap on it, if somebody asks you to stop using cis against them and you continue to do so because they find it offensive, then you become an asshole. I think that's where
that's logically consistent. I can handle that.
Yeah, I can agree with that too.
All right. Well, with that, we'll continue on with the super chats. So keep them coming in, everybody. We still got a lot of discussion, I'm sure, surrounding these these things that you guys are bringing up. So I just got to scroll up again because I did scroll around looking for specifically ones for Sanvi before she left. Bro, John Doe, 11.99 euro. That's just a fun thing to say, Bro, John Doe. If hypothetically male is man, female is woman, and intersex is gender neutral, could we just identify everybody that way without limiting anyone's freedom of expression?
Yeah, intersex is not gender neutral, so that's a common misconception. Intersex doesn't mean like in between sexes. Intersex is basically just like having both sex characteristics. That's what it means, right? And the common thing about it's actually kind of weird that intersex is always brought up so often as it is, because intersex quite literally does not belong in this conversation. It doesn't, and it doesn't for two main reasons. One, if the whole thing about it is identity, right, and how you identify, then abnormalities in more or less birth defects don't really have a place in the conversation. One. Two, another reason why intersex is brought up as often as it is because people think that there are way more intersex people than what there actually is. People would love to quote the 1.7% of the population is intersex. That's not true at all. It damn near couldn't be farther from the truth. That number refers to the Ann Fausto Sterling. And what the Ann Fausto Sterling number does is it puts in conditions into the intersex category that clinicians themselves do not count as intersex, such as Klinefelters, such as, and here's another crazy one. Believe it or not, micropenis is also in the Ann Fausto Sterling. That's why the number is 1.7%. The actual number is almost 100 times lower. It's not 1.7%. It's 0.018%. So that's the second reason they don't belong in the conversation, because it's such an infinitely small part of the population that when you talk about intersex people, you need to specifically be talking about intersex people and not drag them into other conversations where they don't belong.
Yeah, I think that I agree with Tony on that one. I think it's that would be possibly a sex argument that they could be brought into, but not necessarily not a gender one.
Yeah, and I'll add, I think though I agree mostly with your criticism of the 1.7. I think it also comes from the fact that this word has historically not had like a standardized definition, and so it's been used in a lot of different contexts and different papers and different studies and stuff. And yeah, so there's a lot of problems that come from it. Yeah.
Wait, one quick thing. I have the stream open and I saw one quick comment. And this is kind of important too, because this is another common misconception. Someone said hermaphrodites are both. This is not true at all. So we actually very loosely use the term hermaphrodite when we're talking about Homo sapiens. There has never been any case of true hermaphroditism in any mammalian species ever, because that would quite literally break science, right? Mammalians are sexually dimorphic species, and that would break the rule, right? When we use the term hermaphrodites in humans, we're actually using it in the sense of intersex. There has never been a case of true hermaphroditism in any mammalian species, to my knowledge, especially not in humans, right? And for examples of hermaphroditic species would be like sponges. That's why SpongeBob SquarePants is so fruity. I believe sea anemones are some other ones amongst many other species, but there's never been one for mammalians.
Thoughts on the other side?
I'm good.
Oh, all right. Well, we'll carry on then. There, I got the screens pretty much fixed up. There we go. All right. This is from one of our members, Tuss Beatbox member for 6 months. At Ryan the Mod, Modern Day Debate. Question for Sanvi. Sorry if she already answered. Oh, this was a member question for Sanvi. Do you reject, I guess we'll hand it over to you, Tony. She's left it in your capable hands. Do you reject medical transitioning?
In terms of adults, no. Do whatever you want. I legitimately do not care. Right? Like for adults, yes. In terms of children, I think that anyone who says yes to this question, I think that we will look at them with disgust in the same way that we look at doctors who would used to give women lobotomies in the late 20th century. Or mid to late 20th century or something along those lines, right? Like it's like, oh yeah, this is the right thing to do, and then 20 years time, once you have like where I think, and I hope, I can only pray to God that I'm wrong. In 20 years time, once you have how many kids realize that they were essentially, abused by what happened, and they can't believe that adults allowed this and did this to them. I hope that it won't happen is like a massive wave of suicide in 20, 30 years. Once you have all of these kids who eventually will turn into adults, right? And then they're like, wow, I'm fucked up for the rest of my life. And I didn't actually even want this. I was a 4-year-old and I feel like whatever. Right. So yeah, for adults, I don't care, do what you want, right? But the fact that people are trying to justify puberty blockers for minors, double mastectomies for non-cancer patients, and I hate that I have to say that because people actually use little girls with cancer as a justification of why they should cut off their breast. But yeah, adults, I don't care. Children, anyone who says yes to that question should just immediately. I'm not gonna lie. Anyone who answers yes should immediately be thrown in prison. There's no way to justify
that's a very very extreme position.
That's fine. That's fine.
Sure. Okay, that's very interesting. Yeah, I think it's a very complicated discussion around like minors transitioning. Definitely like socially transitioning. General like gender affirming care largely begins there. I don't think anyone here necessarily has a problem with that. I hope. When it comes to medical care, again, it's complicated. I think that there's going to be cases where this might be the right call. And you know, if you're going to throw me in prison for that, that's kind of wild again. But the desistance rate that you're referring to, where like one day we might see a lot of these people who are desisting, I think what we're describing are people who would go through a transition and then begin to experience gender dysphoria because they were not a good candidate to go through that transition. And so that huge, that large suicide rate that you're describing, that is already what we're seeing in the trans community from a lot of people who don't get access to any sort of medical care as they're going through puberty and stuff. So I find it it seems like the desistance rate has stayed pretty low, like and that when we have the qualifiers we have for gender dysphoria, I think the goal is to get as much as possible, get people who are least likely to be in that desistance category. And I think that largely we seem to be doing a decent job at that. I think we could always do better. We're going to need more data. If we block all medical care for minors, then for trans minors, then we're never going to get that data. So and we're going to continue to just see the existing suicide rates.
But the problem is that we have data in countries other than ours. Like we have data that exists for much longer in much more quote unquote socially acceptable societies. But all of them, besides maybe whatever country the Dutch speak, I don't what is it?
Sweden?
Is it Sweden?
You said Dutch, right?
Well, Sweden is one. Okay, either way, it's just sorry.
Nordic countries.
Nordic,
one of them specifically. But basically, most of the transgender science is based off of Dutch studies, and it would poorly done Dutch studies, right? And not both, but all UK, Sweden, and Finland are all pulling back on gender affirming care medically and socially for minors because none of the data supports that it actually helps them.
Meanwhile, Spain is going fully ahead with data they have gathered. We're going ahead with data we've gathered. We don't have a solid answer for this, but what we do know, and this is to buttress Tony's point, is that if we prevent every single case from going through the process of doing it, we're going to see increased suicide rates from the people that are trans. So if you're going to be against one group of people committing suicide because they made a mistake, then you should be against the other group of people. You should be for the other group of people doing it to prevent their suicides, and then have the chips and as sad as this is to say, have the chips where they lie, because it's not for you or I or anybody else to make this decision for them. It is between them, their doctor, and their parent.
But in that scenario, right, or in those two scenarios, right, like they're like, let's say the extreme one that I hope doesn't happen and the current one that's happening, right, there are people who are going to commit suicide, right, and like based off of raw numbers alone, my answer would lead to less suicides, right? Because because they always, like, people always want to say, oh yeah, you know, like the suicidality rate for trans individuals is so high, right? That basically, if you don't affirm them, that they're going to off themselves. Okay, so that means that literally, if that's the case, that we are the most accepting of this in most Western countries throughout the world that we have ever been in any point in time in history. Okay, so that means that the suicide rate, by that logic, should be the lowest that it's ever been. Okay, but the fact of the matter is, if that's the case, right? If we're more accepting now than we were before, then you should be able to point at any point in time in history and see waves of young adults or people killing themselves because they just didn't fit into their gender.
That's going to be conflating a bunch of different things. People are more depressed, more anxious, more everything else than we knew in the past. We have more people, so there might be more things about that.
People are more depressed and anxious, and all of a sudden the transgender numbers go up. You don't think that's weird at all?
No, I
You
don't
think that
that
you
no,
think
I
there's
don't.
no correlation at
Well,
all?
wait, we say the transgender numbers are going. We're seeing more.
Population.
Like we're actually measuring it. Like we didn't.
Yeah, we're
we
measuring
didn't
it.
even.
We can't
yeah.
know. We can't
We've
know
been
in the
measuring.
past. We didn't measure it.
But we've been measuring it for 30 years, right? That's why
not very
Sweden
long.
is pulling back, right?
Because and I actually wanted to mention this
because Sweden has been socially accepting of this for the last couple decades, right? But all of a sudden, you can literally see in the last decade, like they've recording the numbers, and then it shoots up massively, and all of a sudden, the people who identified as trans were males, and that was the largest group, and now it's teenage girls.
Yes,
arguably, not really arguably, the group of people most able to be socially influenced by anything going on.
So
right?
The reason that they are pulling back on this is because they saw that spike and they're more conservative in this than we are. We don't have data on whether or not this sudden spike in people identifying this is something to do with biology that's always been hidden or some social contagion. We don't have the data. It doesn't exist, right? So we can't know. And if for Tony and I's position, we know that people are going to commit suicide if they don't get the care. If that is the case, and we know that now, we don't know how many people desist will commit suicide. We know that the number of people that desist is incredibly rare based on the data that we have from the last 30 years. Ergo, it shouldn't be you, I, or Tony's position to stop people from doing that. That should be the decision between them, their parent, and their doctor.
And just one more thing I wanted to add, like when it comes to this, the like Sweden pulling back on this, your position is also far more extreme than theirs is. They're not banning the use of any puberty blockers at all. There are certain medications that are being removed from the table, and then there are other medications that are moving forward with very, very mediated trials, right? So your position would include throwing a lot of these people in jail who are carrying on with this, which not on any of these countries would support your position on this.
Let's carry on there, everybody. And we just had another one come in here. Let's scroll on up. So it was from Earth1G, 500 RSD. I don't understand how Ryan and CSP don't see any problem with just believing someone is right because they say so. Why can't I have age identity? You don't see my age. Your logic doesn't expand at all.
I can engage with this. The thing that I'm accepting when somebody tells me their identity is that of a woman or a man is just that. I don't have to assume any biological truth of the matter, because when they're saying that, I don't feel like they're telling me a statement about their biology. So I'm not making any. I don't understand. Like, there's nothing that would have to accept that would be like fundamentally denying some piece of reality. All that I'm referring to is that identity and what they're communicating it with me. So I'm not if someone is a trans woman, they're not saying that they are a cis woman, right? Just to put it very cleanly, like that's not the claim that's being made. So.
Alrighty, well, let's continue on then. If you guys are good with that. That was our first super chat from Earth1G. Thanks for that. My good friend Monty is in the chat saying he disagrees with me. Well, you know what? I disagree with you. We should be playing Ogre Battle and like making rock music. Where you at, buddy? All right. Darcy Lauren, $5 Canadian. The brain is our largest sex organ. True or false? If true, does it follow that sex is psychological and therefore gender identity is a component of sex? I'll see it. Also a first super chat. Thank you for that, Darcy. I'll hand it over to you, fellas. True or false?
Wait, just repeat it. I was going to say, repeat that. Just the question part.
True or false? The brain is our largest sex organ.
No. It's not that's crazy. That's a crazy statement. That's a crazy question.
I guess like I use my brain to like riz people up, I guess. So like maybe in some sense, that's part of it. I'm often attracted to personality traits that are associated with things, but I don't know I don't know what they're getting at with the sex brain thing.
I think they're talking about attraction. I think it's maybe they're talking about, or maybe like your thoughts when you're engaging with all that good love making. Anyway, so if true, does it follow that sex is psychological, therefore gender identity is a component of sex? I'm not sure if we're gonna be able to answer this one, Darcy, with the context that you have there. So
I just, that question is just it's so bad. I literally don't know how to interact with it. I can't even lie to you. Like the brain is literally not a sex organ.
Yeah, and by that definition, the skin would be a larger sex organ, right?
Yeah, like the skin is the largest organ in the body, right? Or
that's much more
on the body, right?
That's
so
definitely
no,
being utilized more. Or in different ways, you know.
Yeah. I respectfully need the next question.
Well, did you have any thoughts, CSP, or you want to move on?
Sanvi in the chat is asking if she can come back in.
Did I come back? Oh, hi, Zombie. Somebody was just asking about you.
Sure. If you want to come back, just hit the Zoom link that I sent you there.
I don't want her back, actually.
Hey, listen, W take. Nah, W take. Listen, I'm with you, Ryan.
That's all right. That's all right. There we go. Let us get our screens reorganized.
Can I answer that person's question really quick before she jumps in?
Oh, she's already here.
Well, I mean, jumps in with her voice. Anyways, to answer the question, I don't think that the sex component really matters to this debate at all. So, there you go.
Hey, welcome back, Sanvi. How's it going?
Good. How are you? Sorry, I had to take care of my dog for a second.
That's all right. We understand. So, yeah, we just asked a question there. It was yeah, we'll move on from there because it was a bit of a weird one. So hot dogs for sale, $2. Who was Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld?
No clue.
Another one of the many monsters behind this entire ideology.
Is this like trivia?
He's put in the category with Kinsey and Money. They're all monsters. They rotten pieces. That's my answer to that one.
Oh, I know the John Money lore, but I agree that was a guy was not a person to look up to. But I do think that the thing that emerged from that was a kid who was who would have otherwise been a cis boy, who then started to experience gender dysphoria because he was being treated like a girl, and then all of the consequences that we often see with gender dysphoria started to manifest there as well.
Correct.
I mean, he probably, I mean, sure, but it's probably because you know, I don't think necessarily gender. I think gender dysphoria is kind of a very. I think gender dysphoria is an odd thing.
It is odd,
but also gender dysphoria isn't required for being trans. So
I agree.
Yeah, that's true. And money was trying to prove that gender is all made up and it doesn't matter and it's just strictly social. So the fact that they were trying to impose this identity onto this young man, to this boy, despite the fact that they were not fitting in, kind of helps buttress our point, I believe, more so.
I would say I would make the argument that the beginnings of something are always extremely important, right? And the fact that pretty much every progenitor of the ideology, not even just necessarily the gender part of it, but the sexuality part of it, the odd fact that all of them are monsters is kind of red flaggy to me. Not gonna lie to you.
Yeah, I would have to have that proven to me because I've seen these claims before.
Have you heard of, you know, Alfred Kinsey?
I know who Alfred Kinsey is. I've studied the man fairly extensively because of these kind of conversations. And there's been misrepresentations about what he had done and what he had encouraged. He faked data. He was a piece of shit, but that does not mean that the ideas that he had are in and of themselves also pieces of shit. And then also we have to go back all the way throughout history to see if there's any sort of, not confluence, sort of similar things that have happened and whether or not these things originate with these people. And I simply do not believe that they originated with these 3 or 4, whatever many people we find in the future.
I mean, I would say they originated with them in modern sense, but like if you want to look at it in the sense of like, look at the Greek culture, right? Like that was I would argue that was, I wouldn't even argue, I would say it was an extremely like openly homosexual society, right? And all of a sudden like way more males.
Same thing with Japanese culture and a lot of other cultures in the ancient history. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'll add, I don't think we should like dismiss the concept of America because a lot of our forefathers were slave-holding rapists. I still like it here. So,
but what? No, there's a difference between like what an individual does, right? And like, how do I put this? So the things that let's take Kinsey and Money, for example, right? Yes, they were monsters, and at times the forefathers were monsters too, right? But Kinsey and Money use their actions as a monster to justify the thing, to justify and try to validate and use that as evidence for the things that they believed in, right? The forefathers were just terrible people. Like they had their terrible actions were completely separate from the good that they did. right? You can still talk about the terrible actions that they had. I'm 100%, right?
You don't think
well-
Kinsey did anything that is separate from his evil actions at all?
Not in terms of what he contributed to science. No.
Really?
But with the forefathers example, as they were like when their construction of America was a white supremacist state, like that was like fundamental to the core identity that they were putting forth there. So I think even again there, like the fact that we've removed that aspect for a large part, at least, that we've removed that aspect from the core of America doesn't mean that like we should abolish the rest of it. Like we keep the good stuff. That's the idea.
Yeah, we people on the left generally have a problem with, you know, trying to jettison every single aspect of something because it comes from bad people. I'm not one of those people, so I don't understand why this is.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't figure you're one of those people. I didn't think that at all, but unfortunately, we do know that there are a lot of those people,
yeah,
as
sure,
I like
sure.
to say on the left, right? Like it's like oh yeah, like America's like a white supremacist country. No, it's not.
It kind of is, but yeah, sure.
No, it's not.
We can debate about that another time.
Yeah, different time. Hey, Ryan, look, now we got a topic for the next time. Is America a white supremacist country?
I've been saying I want to do a critical race theory debate on modern day debate for a while. So if you're down, we can set that up.
I have 2 other people that have asked me about something very similar, so we'll talk because we already have some way to line that up, I think. So yeah, let's carry on with our Q&A.
Wait, before you ask this, I will say it was a while ago, but I saw in the comments when somebody asked me about like the medical affirming thing, and I was reading the comments on the YouTube, whatever, and someone said like gender affirming care for minors is not permanent. Not all of it, but some of it, yes. Unless someone unless you say that a 12-year-old who gets her breast removed can just grow them back, then yeah, it's kind of permanent. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I was gonna say, I was just trying to inject there just to remind you that actually that question was for Sanvi. So
oh yeah, it was.
yeah, unfortunately you weren't here.
Wait, what was the question? I want to answer it.
Trying to scroll up here and find it.
While you're finding it, did you say 12? I don't think any 12-year-olds are getting mastectomies, to be clear.
That's factually untrue.
Oh, okay.
There's quite literally a case of an 18-year-old right now. It was either 12 or 14, one of the two. Like, don't call me on for that specific woman, but she turned 18. She's like, I can't believe y'all let this happen because I said I was the boy. Wow, that's crazy. And then
you're talking about Chloe.
I don't remember what her name is. Can't lie to you. I've seen so many different cases of it.
Yeah, it is happening. I won't reject it. It's not happening.
Yeah,
for
like
the mastectomies, anyways.
Yeah. I'm not gonna say like the bottom surgery. That's that one. I can't find. I won't say any definitive claims, but I would say that, like, to my knowledge, nothing under 18-year-olds. That's to my knowledge. But for double,
there's been cases of 16-year-olds getting it.
Yeah, I've heard it, but I don't want to say definitively.
Sorry to inject there, everybody.
In fact, I don't even think it's a consent issue for these people. The primary reason they don't give people like vaginoplasties or whatever is because their body physically can't handle it when they're too immature.
Right.
You probably answered the question, but I did find it finally, which was to you, Sanvi, which was from a member. It was Tuss Beatbox and asked, do you reject medical transitioning? I think we got our answer, but we're going to ask it like that.
For adults?
For adults, too.
No, I think the adults should have the legal right to. I just think it's wrong still.
You elaborate on that? What's wrong about it?
I mean, it's built on a false premise. The premise being that you can change your gender.
Well, it seems like even if they like accepted your view of them not like, 'cause it seems like they do largely agree with you that they can't change their like biological sex, but it doesn't seem like that's what they're saying they're doing. They're just more aligning their body with how they would like they like think it should be.
Yeah. I guess I do have various moral issues with that, but I do think that should be legal.
Yeah, I would say that it's immoral. I would make that argument, but like if they want to do it, I don't think it should be illegal.
Right.
Just to be clear, that largely comes from like a religious view on like the natural. No. Can you give like a secular explanation for why it's immoral?
My views on.
For me, at least.
It's like, why are you doing this? When we really get to the bottom of it, it's because the idea is that a trans person is valid in their identity. That's what it boils down to, is that they're validating their internal identity, which I don't validate. I don't think that their internal identity is valid. So.
then we got my answer to the question.
I would say like for religious purposes, no. Right, like for me being religious, like it's like I've been on TikTok for a year. The religious thing is less than a couple months old, right? So I would say and this is, remember when I mentioned earlier about the conspiracy theory? I'll try to make it brief, but like from a different side of it, completely regardless of religious, right? Most people would agree, left or right, that America being capitalist, there's a lot of corrupt parts of it, right? It's corruption in terms of making money, right? Big pharma is one of those industries, right? I think most people again would agree that big pharma doesn't legitimately give a shit about most people. They care about making money, right? With that being said, the transgender medical health is a billion-dollar industry, and it's only getting more, and they're only making more and more money, right? So I think it's immoral in the sense that, like, yeah, oh, there are studies that say this. I don't care, right? Because whenever people want to make money, especially things like big pharma, they will say whatever they need to say in order to make any money. There's literally a movie of this, Thank You for Smoking, where it talks about big tobacco doing the same. Yeah, no, it's a great movie, right? And it's literally about big tobacco doing whatever they need to do, flat out lying, flat out falsifying evidence in order to justify, hey, smoking's actually good for you. And that's what I think is essentially happening with the transgender health thing. In terms of socially transitioning, I don't care, act how you want, but like everything else, you're becoming a patient.
I have a question for you then, Tony, if you don't mind. Say that absent the profit motive that exists inside the current United States medical industry.
Yes.
If it did not exist, if there was not a billion-dollar industry, if they weren't making money off of it, and there was price controls, say, for everything, right? Like some medical systems do. The UK implemented this at one point. Several other countries have done it as well. Would you still be against it from a moral perspective based on the fact that they're not making money anymore?
I suppose no. I suppose in the thing about it is, in the most extreme cases, no, right? And that's simply just because, like, whenever it comes to like actually, like, let's say like legitimate gender dysphoria, right? Like in the sense that whatever life that you're living, your brain cannot comprehend it and will not ever be able to comprehend it. I see it the exact same sense as anything else, right? Like, should schizophrenic people be allowed to take meds? Yes. Right. But just because someone says that they're schizophrenic, should we give them meds? No. Right. And that's why I think that it's important. I'm actually very glad that you mentioned that, because that's why I think it's important that other European countries are pulling back on it, and countries like America are not. Right. Because other countries don't care about as much of the profit, and they care more so about their actual people's health. Right. And the fact that, like I said, teenage girls are now all of a sudden the largest group of trans identifying individuals. And we all can pretty much agree that whenever it comes to anything that happens socially, I know people hate this word, but I use it anyway, social contagion, that teenage girls are more than likely to fall into that.
Yeah, but we actually have to, like, even that social contagion argument concludes non-binary people that have no intention of getting surgery, etc. Like, we have to be able to tease these things out when we're talking about this, and that's almost impossible right now because we don't have the data. So I get the caution, and that's why other countries are doing the caution, but they're not stopping it entirely, as Tony had said.
I didn't. They're not stopping. When I say that, like, they're not stopping it 100%. No, right. But they are pulling back on it, like, heavily, except, like I said, in the most extreme cases, right?
In like, Spain, they're going full force ahead. The UK is pulling back on it, but the UK has a conservative government that also does not agree that transgenderism is a thing, or is it extremely rare, so they shouldn't be doing it. Pretty much, there's all sorts of barriers. We have to be able to tease all these things out when we talk about this to actually get to the heart of the matter. But that's all I'll say about it.
All right, well, let's try to carry on in our live chat there, and supers, keep them coming in, everybody, and we'll keep the conversation going. Zombie is back from taking out the dogs, so we are excited to keep the conversation rolling. I keep preambling because I'm looking for the next question. Keep preambling, Ryan.
Okay.
Keep it rolling. All right, young old boy. Yeah, that's a little bit too much on the attacking side.
Okay, now you have to read it. You can't just say that and then not give it to me.
Yeah, please read it.
Or at the very least, put it in chat and then let us decide if you should ask it or not. At the very least, because you can't just tease me with that information. Oh, that's a little bit too much. No, like, I gotta know.
Fine. Now I've got. Yeah, I was gonna say, now that I've just, I won't say anything inappropriate because I've done that before. I get in trouble. All right.
Okay,
so
put it in chat.
But
put it in chat.
No. I mean, I don't mean that. I mean what you said about juicing up the audience there and yourself. So I'm not gonna make any inappropriate comments, but I will read the question since you're also curious. It says 100% Tony, prison for these demonic weirdos.
Oh, I remember seeing that one. Yeah, I remember that one.
No,
So we
thank
don't
you.
usually like to read chats like that, so try to keep them relevant to the subject, guys. I know you might see some spicy stuff happening up here, but we do want to keep the conversation as far as that goes relevant. So go
Well,
ahead.
also, wait, no, there was one dude in the comments. I don't remember his. I do remember his name. If I see his PFP, I can say exactly what it is because this is something I wanted to address because this is very, very serious. Okay, it's this individual. His name is Sean Dixon in the comment section. I want to let you know that it is incredibly. Like to say, oh, Tony has this weird fixation on teenage girls. I want you to understand that what you're saying with that. I need you to understand like how like that's not even like respectfully, that's not even a joke, right? Like maybe in certain circumstances amongst friends, but like to just say that, like it's crazy to me.
Those are the same people who would cancel you for saying a racist joke, but will literally make pedophilic comments like that.
Yeah, it's like you have no reason to think that. It's like my bad if I think that we should care about children. My fault, G. I'll stop doing that. Like, what's wrong with some? Like, what is wrong with some of y'all?
Sure, that person sounds kind of cringe. But to the last comment, which we're hesitant to say is an attack. Just for the record, that person was echoing a sentiment put forth by Tony here.
I didn't say demonic weirdos. I didn't say that.
Sure, but you did say that we belong in prison.
If you answer yes to that question, yes.
In which what the question I believe was any sort of medical care for trans youth. Or medical gender affirmation in any way, which is a very, very extreme stance, by the way, even in America.
That's fine.
Yeah, I personally don't believe supporting it should lead you to be in jail.
Appreciate that. Free Ryan.
Maybe you've committed other crimes that I would think warrant jail.
We can fight about that later.
Alrighty. Well, actually, we have a member question here from Hannah, who's an avid member in our Discord. Thanks for all you do. Trans is such a small group. How does Big Pharma make millions off of such a small group?
Top surgery alone is like $10,000.
How much of that is profit?
Interesting question.
Great question. No way of knowing.
Yeah, we would need to determine how much of this is actually profit in order to answer the totality of the question.
When someone says something is $1 billion industry, is that referring to profit or just
it's straight revenue?
That's just straight revenue.
Yeah, doctors are very expensive in the United States. That's a problem just in general.
But no, I do know. I actually do know about one specific instance. It was talking about a bunch of the clinics who had recently picked up gender affirming care, like plastic surgeons and whatnot. And they were talking about how like in the last couple of years that they had gone from, obviously they're doctors, they're rich, right? But from going to being rich to like being disgustingly wealthy. Like they themselves have turned around from, let's say they made, I don't remember the exact numbers. Let's say they made $300,000 a year, right? Now their clinic is making millions of dollars a year. And this is just an individual clinic, right?
I think I've seen this video. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. If you have,
no, I was done. I was done.
Yeah, I think I've seen this particular video, and they were making a case to the board of directors to allow this to continue from a financial perspective because it was making them money. I don't necessarily think that is inherently, or I don't think necessarily that is wrong to do. If you, so for example, if there's only X number of trans people, right, and you become really good at trans care, you're going to absorb all that and you're going to make millions of dollars in our current healthcare system. That doesn't mean that we should say trans care because it has a profit motive behind it right now is wrong. It just might be the way that the cookie crumbles, so to speak.
All right. We'll continue on. Though Hannah did clarify, she said that's not Big Pharma, that's surgical. So if you guys had thoughts on that, given all,
Big Pharma makes all the drugs. No.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, like all of the drugs that you have to take, right? Like they make those. No. So even if in like Big Pharma, realistically, I'm just saying it like colloquially. I'm just saying like the medical industry in a whole. Like I'm just using a colloquial term.
Yeah. So almost like by definition, then what you're saying is true. Like.
All right, well, let's continue on with our super chats. Remember to keep them friendly, everybody, because I prefer that. So I don't have any hesitation on like, well, is that really relevant? Is that going to put us down a rabbit hole of ad-homs? All right, coconut cream pie, $5. The existence of transgender confirmed that there are only two modes of gender roles, masculine and feminine.
I don't think so. Well, first of all, that there are transgender people, like non-binary people would fall under the umbrella of transgender. But also, again, I think we actually didn't really talk about this too much, but I think that one of the things that extends from mine, I think Cypher's understanding of gender as well, is that like people's engagement with these topics are going to vary person to person. So what it means for one person to be a man, whether they're cis or trans, is going to be different from the next person in line. And same for women, same for non-binary. All these things are going to be very different. All of these genders are going to be very distinct in a lot of ways. There's going to be tons of overlap, but this is why I'm open to the idea there could be 8 billion genders. I don't really care. I think, but generally you're going to see these particular archetypes of man and women that people identify strongly with.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. We're seeing some instance of gender becoming gender presentation as a form of self-identity and self-expression, and I think we'll continue to see that as things move forward.
Alrighty, let's carry on with the super chats there, everybody. And remember to hit that like button because it does help us out. Bro John Doe, €5.99. I'm somewhat clueless about this topic. Laugh my ass off. So does cis refer to one gender corresponding with their sex?
Basically. Yes. I mean, in what the term means, yeah. I reject the term, but yes.
Take it.
You agree with that as well, Samvi?
No. I understand from their perspective what cisgender means. It's just not real.
W.
All right. Well, you heard it here first, everybody. V Radio, $5. I am all in for an anti-CRT side. I am in for an anti-CRT side of the debate. Team me up with Tony. That's from V Radio. I'm not sure if they're another YouTuber or
TikToker.
They're YouTube.
Word.
Yeah.
Oh, they are?
Yeah.
Both maybe.
W.
Yeah, I think critical race theory is based as fuck. So yeah, I'm down.
Hey, wait, no. I just caught this one. I'm sorry. I got to derail for a second. Sean, what in the name of God is wrong with you? This man, he just said, I bet Tony will avoid saying teenage girl from now on. What is wrong with you?
I mean, I think that person, okay, I'm not trying to be rude, guys, but remember when I asked you guys the question of, do you believe somebody can be man or woman at the same time? This person shot in the chat said, yep, that's me. That's basically me. And if that tells you all you need to know,
I don't think that tells you anything. I feel like I understand that the slurs, not slurs, the personal attacks that are happening does happen to be not conducive to this and very wrong. But to laugh at their gender identity, I think is also to be wrong and rude and everything else. So you can hit back, but I don't think that is conducive to anything.
I don't think that's necessarily what she's laughing at per se.
She said that tells you everything that you need to know about that person. The fact that tells you nothing that you need to know about them. You don't know their personality.
It does tell you everything.
It does.
There's very clear reason why now they would be offended by Tony arguing what he's argued, because they have absurd, crazy views that Tony doesn't agree with.
Yeah, and you can.
But if you're going to complain about personal attacks, you shouldn't do personal attacks against other people.
I'm not complaining about personal attacks. That's not. I'm complaining about the fact that they're essentially calling me a pedo.
I understand that, and that's a personal attack. You didn't make the personal attack. Sanvi did when they laughed at them. So that is the contention I'm having with. If you're going to say the personal attacks are not irrelevant and shouldn't happen, then you should be consistent in that approach and not do it yourself.
But Cypher, that's not what we're saying. Right, it's not like you want to personally attack me, fine. You want to make fun of my skin color, my height, my eyebrows, my voice, anything. I literally don't care. It's the fact that the specific kind of personal attack is calling someone a pedo. That's the problem.
But we agree that's bad.
I agree. Yeah. No, I understand that, right? I would hope that you do, but it's not the problem isn't that it's a personal attack. That's not what that's. Sure. I don't care. Just say whatever you want.
Well, we'll try to make sure that those types of comments are mitigated and hopefully removed. I can't keep an eye on all of the stuff while I'm working through the questions there. So hopefully our mods can help clean up the live chat a little bit there. And let's continue on.
Just one quick thing. I gotta step away for a second. I have a tiny bladder. I'll be right back. I don't mean to be rude.
That's all good.
I can take it.
That's all good. To the yes point, I'm on the yes side. I'm on the east side. I was thinking of Men in Tights earlier. As you guys were talking, I was thinking about it because I met Carrie Yulesley about a year ago, and He was, you know, an interesting character for sure. But of course, we went home and watched Princess Bride, and we're men in tights, 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 you know, and fun. Don't let the
Now
kids
that we're
watch that.
men, we
Oh,
can
true.
do
Yeah, that's what I thought of. I thought of the
anything. Now that we're
SpongeBob. Yeah.
men.
Oh no,
Based.
I'm thinking.
I was thinking of the
old
Mulan one, but I
school.
can't think of. Oh yeah,
Be a man.
We're trying to vamp.
That's what it
on
means to be a man.
CSP.
Being as swift as a
yeah.
coursing river. That's the true definition.
Be a man, you must be swift as a coursing river. Be a man with
All right, we're gonna get
what
hit
a
with
bop.
copyright. No,
Yeah,
Disney
yeah.
can't. No, stop,
True.
stop. We're getting too
All right, what's
excited.
the next question? What's the
We're
next
getting too
question?
excited. Yeah. All right. Well, CSP should be back in, you know, a couple seconds.
for
So
him?
we'll ask the question and we'll continue on. Gordon Mercer, $5. To the yes point, I'm on the yes side, but how does constantly talking about masculinity and femininity deconstruct the labels into more than a binary?
Okay, I understand that. So I think the idea is that these are like kind of peaks of these archetypes, like masculinity and man are like these are almost synonymous. Like masculinity is, I think, defined by like things that are associated with men, and like femininity is defined as things associated with women. It's kind of hard to disentangle these things completely. I think man and women are going to be the primary archetypes that people identify with, but they're going to identify with them for very different reasons, and that's where the kind of spectrum comes in, as well as there are people who don't identify with either, so that would necessitate at least 3 genders, but as many as 8 billion.
Any thoughts on the other side on that?
Wait, ask the question one more time, if you don't mind.
No, that's all right. I was going to say it was more in response to what Ryan just expressed there, but I can ask the question again. To the yes point, I'm on the yes side, but how does constantly talking masculinity and femininity deconstruct the labels into more than a binary?
Is
feel
that
like
kind
it
of framed
doesn't.
thus?
Yeah, like it said like, oh yeah, because the question is, are there more than 2 genders? The person said yes, but then they asked that question. It's like, doesn't that kind of? That's why I said it was a good question, that because I missed they're saying yes, but like, doesn't that kind of support our side?
Sort of. I think what they're saying is that, like, from a from what one might imagine a gender abolitionist perspective is that we would put a lot of effort into disentangling things from these archetypes, right? That we would like show that there's a lot more room. We would talk more about like the values like in between these discrete identities, but which I largely agree with. Those are important things to navigate and talk about. But I don't think that we don't live in a world that's quite at the point where we can like pretend that these archetypes don't exist and that people don't identify strongly with them.
All right. Well, we can move on from there if we've wrapped up all our thoughts on that. Yeah, keep the super chats coming in, everybody. We're having a good conversation here. Hot dogs for sale. Hot dogs for sale. $5. CSP. Why do cross-dressing males exclusively feel the need to drag dance nude in front of children? Is that biological drive or just moral relativism?
That question is crazy.
I don't think that question actually happens in reality. I think that this is a poor way to phrase this kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know.
Wait, repeat the
because
hold on,
this
hold on,
most definitely does
wait, Zombie, hold on. Ryan, repeat that question one more time for me.
Yeah, I do want to kick it over to Stanvi though after I asked the question.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Just hold your thought. CSP, why do you think cross-dressing males exclusively feel the need to drag dance nude in front of children? Is that biological drive or just moral relativism?
Drag queen dancing in the nude kind of is a misnomer, isn't it? Because you're in a drag is a costumed performance, so there generally speaking isn't any nudity.
Over to you, Stanvi.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a lot of inappropriate things being done in front of children in the name of LGBT inclusivity. That's all I'd say about that. Obviously, not every single one. I'm just saying it's a general pattern I've noticed.
I wouldn't even say most of them. I would say that it is a small subset of them. But the fact of the matter is, like, it's not. Bad things will happen with any group of people. right? Doesn't matter what group of people, bad things will always happen. But the problem comes into play whenever those bad actions are or are not justified. Even CSP, if I'm not mistaken, just said like that doesn't happen. Yes, it does.
Yeah,
Like
I
it
said it
does.
doesn't happen initially, but I do believe that if this does happen, this isn't any biological driven kind of thing, and that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
also,
I would agree.
Also, I have a problem with this question because oftentimes people will say, "Oh, this is moral degeneracy," and it's just a guy in a thong gyrating. What we don't have an
It's
issue
moral
with that.
degeneracy.
We
No,
don't
no, but
have
like,
a problem with that.
I mean, like you can do that. Like, no one, like, it's
We-
if you want to call it moral degeneracy, that's fine, right? But do it in your own home. Do it in like private spaces.
Just
a
don't do it in
social
front of
setting.
children, that's
In
all.
a social setting, we do not have this problem when we're talking about other things in front of children that are nearly equivalent. For
Like what?
example, cheerleaders, pop shows, rap videos. Like, I understand that conservatives bring these points up a lot, but the fact of the matter is, generally speaking, throughout all of society, there's these things that are accepted. Some conservatives will take their kids to Hooters. I don't see, if you're going to be against, like, I understand to be consistent.
that's
There's going to be
Yeah, that's
people
wrong.
who said that's wrong. I understand that, but my point is that these kind of questions don't frame it in that way.
And see, that's exactly like when you're talking about like moral degeneracy, like that's the problem, right? Like even saying, and obviously, like there isn't necessarily any reason for you to know about everything that happens, like no one ever does, right? But the question said, like what about these things happening, and then you saying, oh, it doesn't happen, like
Yeah, that was
does, right?
reflexive, and I apologize for that, and I corrected myself.
No, and I understand that, right? But like the fact, it's like if I were to hear something about that for something I believed in, right? I would say like, oh, I've never heard of it. It's a possibility, but like if it happened,
Yes,
it's wrong,
I
blah, blah, blah,
understand.
right? And so, and for you, it's reflexive. I'll give you that. That's fine, right? But for a lot of people, they will not. It's not only reflexive, but then that's their standpoint. Like, no, that doesn't happen, right? Like I've been seeing comments where saying,
Sure.
oh, like this terrible thing doesn't happen, right? And that's like denying something is essentially justifying it. Right,
No,
like
that doesn't mean that. No, I don't
Not
agree with that at
necessarily,
all. I don't.
it depends. It depends
If
on
I-
what it depends on what it is, right? Like, would you say
Yeah.
that, like, for example, and I'm going to go. I hate the fact that I was the one to buy into Godwin's law first, but I'm going to do it. Okay. Would you say that Holocaust deniers are bad?
Generally
Denying the
speaking,
Holocaust is bad, yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah, exactly.
Always
Right.
bad.
Like, thank God, right? I hate that I fell into Godwin's law. I hate that it was me first. I wish one of y'all could have done it first. But like, and it's like that kind of thing, right? So it's like by denying this thing that we can all objectively agree is bad. Like and I'm not saying you're doing
the issue that I have with this is that oftentimes people will say, "Oh, this guy was completely naked in front of this child," and that is not the case. Right.
But that is the case. Like I have seen photos of that actually.
We can, okay, if you've seen photos of it, then I don't want to necessarily see them, but I need the evidence.
I didn't want to either.
And my point is that people say these things and then they present the evidence and it's a guy in a thong. Like there was recently there was some slightly overweight man that was dancing at a pride parade in a thong, and they were like, look at this moral degeneracy for body positivity. They're grooming our kids. And I'm just like, no, that's not naked. That's not nudity. You don't have this position on anything else. You're not at all consistent here. This is not, we don't have these things. And that's why I don't like the framing of these questions in that way. I need to have a direct example so I know what you're talking about. And then we can talk about more of it in the future. That is all I'm going to say.
I think context of being nude, quote unquote, is important, right? Like, yeah, in terms of beaches, no one cares if anyone's in their swimsuits, right? Like that's fine because that's what's expected, right? You would expect to see people in their swimsuits, but even still, there are some swimsuits that are quite literally banned on a lot of beaches, right? Like you can't be in the nude either. Your swimsuit can't be too small. Right, like this is commonplace, right? And as far as like taking children to Hooters, most people would agree that's kind of bad, right? Like most people would they would see a child in Hooters. You might even have some people who would go so far it's like they would walk up to the parent like, "What's wrong with you? Why are you bringing your kid here?" Right?
Not sure
and
that's
there,
the case.
I
get your point.
Right, and then like we don't take children to strip clubs.
True. Right? Yeah. So okay, if I can back it up just a little bit on all this, I think like obviously I think we're all going to agree there are plenty of situations where things are inappropriate. They're happening around children. I think somebody said something where these things are being done in the name of LGBTQ identity or like ideology. I don't think that is what's even in those cases where there might be an LGBTQ person involved. I don't think that means it's being done in the name of those things or on behalf of that group of people. And I don't think that we should like. I think that I'm not saying you guys have done this, but I think it's happening a lot right now where people are very quick to assign this to that community based on these very fringe examples that like most people will absolutely condemn. And I also agree with the kind of double standard that we see about whether it's Hooters or child beauty pageants or things. These are things that I like largely have not seen conservatives express a lot of outrage about historically, and now there are more who are willing to bite those bullets. But I think the legislation now is targeting like drag queens in general in a lot of states, which I think is absurd. They're like it seems like the thing they're targeting more is just like gender bending or like non-conventional gender expression, which is a very scary slippery slope that I don't ever want to see legislated in my America, which is very freedom based. So.
Wait, quick thing real quick. So the chat cannot see the YouTube chat cannot see our chat, correct?
True.
Okay, so I don't think that I can put files in the chat, but I think that I can put Google Drive links, correct?
You can do that. Yeah, and if you want to do this in the future, we can all get on a Discord together and just message each other if that's something you want to do.
So I have I just have a quick quick link for Cypher right quick because someone put it in my Discord because they can hear this. Where's the share button? Good Lord.
Yeah, just to respond to that while you do that though, I think me and Tony can both agree that it's not the majority of the LGBT community, and it sucks that like those fringe people are, you know, they kind of ruin it for everybody. So yeah. And
there's also just for one other thing about this, there's people like Ryan was saying that they're being labeled as doing it for LGBT when it's like a baby event for wine moms that want to be able to do something fun while they have childcare. And, you know, to them, they're like, the baby's not going to remember anything of this. They're just going to be there. So it's more of the social gathering for the adult. And generally speaking, we let adults do things like that. Maybe you might not personally agree with somebody in fetish wear, quote unquote, dancing in front of children, but that's not inherently sexual. That's not inherently damaging. So,
yeah, and the event that you're referring to is also
Tony. I don't consider it to be necessarily fetish.
Yeah, just a last addendum to the event you're referring to. I think there was also like the kids that were welcome there were also like had to be within the age range of like 0 to 2.
Yeah,
so it was like explicitly like if you're a mom and you wanted to go to this event, like you couldn't bring like an older child who was going to be like having formative memories about what they're seeing in front of them.
And culturally speaking, America's got this weird thing with nudity in general. The rest of the world does not have this weird thing with nudity. There are other cultures that do. Different cultures have different things, and there's been an evolution over time. But generally speaking, we don't necessarily. Generally speaking, other parts of the world do not have as a you cannot be naked anywhere at any time as much as the United States does.
Yeah, and how many of those are civilized modern societies?
Germany, they have sunbathing in national parks that you are completely
I have
butt-ass
seen
naked.
that. I've seen like Irish saunas too, but usually they have it to where young children don't go see nude adults.
Literally in the park. Like their version of Central Park, there will be people running around naked in order to sunbathe while getting their exercise on. It is not necessary. It is not the same.
I understand that people don't consider it sexual, but I would still advocate for legislation against having your genitalia out in front of children.
That's fine. I'm not saying that you're like an evil person for that. I just generally don't think that this is necessarily harmful, and I shouldn't be considered
cultural
And
relativism.
also, yeah. Also, one, that's a different cultures, different things. 1, 2, those are still very specific designated areas.
Sure, I'll give you that one.
Like very specific designated areas it's obviously it's nudity, but stay with me. It's like your Hooters, right? So even if there are children there, I would still say that it's wrong to do that. Most people would still say that it's wrong to do that.
Germany, France, Swiss, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland, Luxembourg, etc. all have these kind of things where they do not see nudity of in itself to be harmful to children or to society in general. So
let's try to move on from there. We're kind of on the same topic with this next question, of course, because I'm glad that you guys are keeping it here. Joel Leinbach, $5. Gender identity is separate from biological sex. Are public bathrooms labeled per biological sex or gender identity?
I saw that question and I couldn't hit a harder eye roll when I saw it.
Yeah, I think everyone here yielded that.
Oh,
people
okay, wait.
would-
The gym that I go to, it says women and then it says men, and then under it it says if you have male children, please use the family room. So I think they're already implicitly assuming that women are females. But yeah.
Yeah, like that, and that's why I think that the distinction, that the quote unquote distinction between gender and sex is kind of weird, because most people don't see a distinction. They're the same thing.
Wait, but didn't earlier you guys? I was about to go into this. I thought you both agreed that like people should generally be able to use the bathroom that they present as.
I didn't
identify with.
I didn't
You
say
don't?
that.
Okay.
No, I didn't
So,
say that.
did
I-
I- was
I-
I
I
mistaken?
believe you
I
should
think
go
that-
wherever you pass as.
I think
Okay.
I think that you should go in the bathroom that quote unquote matches your genitals. And the only reason I specifically say that is because of people like Buck Angel and Samantha Lux, right? Because like at that point, like if you're so disingenuous with your identity that you go through the whole shebang and turn your Audi into an innie or vice versa, you know what? You fooled me. I got nothing, right? But in turn, like I think at that point, like they're just trying to quite literally live their life and do their thing.
So
Yeah.
you think it would be comfortable for somebody to see Buck Angel without gender reassignment surgery, bottom surgery? I don't know if Buck Angel has it, so I'm just getting. I'm
Let's say
Let's say somebody.
Wait,
let's
Buck
say
Angel
somebody
doesn't
that's-
have bottom surgery?
I don't think so.
That's crazy.
Yeah, well, so let's
I
say
think-
that somebody
because Buck
fully
Angel's
passes like.
guys.
Yeah, let's say like Zombie says, whatever you pass as, like, so you would be against the passing thing if they haven't gotten bottom surgery. But how are you going to
Yes.
enforce that? And what is passing? And we already had issues with butch lesbians being kicked out of the restroom that they should be going into, based on even the biological segment that you want to put it in.
Right.
And,
that's
I mean, how do you
that's
enforce
why
anything?
ultimately I think that the best way to go about this issue is to do what's going to make the most amount of people comfortable. And I don't think that the majority of men would be comfortable if freaking like a trans woman that fully looks like a female walked into their restroom. And then you get into the convenience if they do have undergone a vaginoplasty, like that equipment in the male restroom is not even going to be as useful to them as the equipment in the women's restroom. So at that point, it's like you might as well just go to the women's restroom. But if you haven't made any attempt to pass as the opposite, like nothing, like no, I think that's going to make people uncomfortable if a full-grown, bearded, like muscular man walks into a women's restroom.
Well, let's try to continue the conversation going, because we do have quite a few super chats to get through, and it has gone on for a little bit late. So I hope everybody's okay with that. I'm letting you guys kind of dictate a little bit of how you want to push the discussion, but we'll try to get through some of these super chats. Pointless Poppy,
Again?
Pointless Poppy is he is
Spoilers.
very busy tonight, and we appreciate it. Tony, how would you like us to prove gender identity? Is why I mentioned proving favor for a color.
The favor for a colored one was for me. I remember that one. I thought that was for anyway. You can't. That's the thing. Like I so heavily reject the notion that there is nothing that you could show me that could prove it to me, right? Because at the end of the day, the only discussions that ever come up in order to prove it, it's never any of the hard sciences. They're all social sciences, right? Whether it be sociology, psychology. There's a third one that I can't think of. That I can't think of right now, but they're never hard sciences. And the thing about soft sciences is you can always reject the notion. That's the whole thing about it.
So I mean, I think the hard soft science distinction is actually like kind of a colloquial thing. I think a lot of times like the data collection that's being done in a lot of the quote unquote soft sciences, it really hinges on being done like you're on using like hard science collective, like you're supposed to write down, this is what we collected, this is who we asked them this question, we did this many people said this many people said that. You're using hard science principles to write about the experiments you're doing. Taking prescriptions from that is obviously a more complex situation, but in terms of like the actual science being done, I think that this follows like a lot of hard science principles, and I think that the distinction between these things is a little bit muddy and it's often used to like dismiss all of these sciences completely, which I think is a very irresponsible way to frame it.
Yeah, okay. To some extent, I would agree with that because I'm getting my degree in economics and it's considered under social science,
Yeah,
right?
self-science,
Even though,
yeah.
like, most of us, when you think about economics, like, it's pretty math heavy. Like, there's a lot that goes into it that's objective fact. So, with things, stuff like that, I would agree that that's kind of iffy and that it should be considered not a social science.
I think it's just okay to be a social science. I just don't think being a social science should be something we
I
shouldn't
don't know.
like
I think I've had
give
to
less
take
weight
way
to
too
something
many
for it.
calculus and computer science classes for me to get a social science degree. I'm sorry.
It's not that I'm ever completely rejecting the notion of social sciences or soft sciences, quote unquote, simply because they are like a lot of them do provide some actual good things, right? That I don't think that most people would disagree with, right? It's not just me just basically shitting on soft sciences, but just because it came from a quote unquote science field doesn't mean that I have to accept it.
Sure. And just to Sanvi's point, though, I think that the frustration you feel with it being labeled a soft science comes from the stigma around soft sciences rather
Right.
than from something inherent to it. But I understand what you're saying.
And the income.
Yeah, true.
Well, let's try to
One
let's
sec.
try to carry on from there. But oh, yeah,
Yeah, one
Our
sec.
our screens have moved around again, everybody. So I'll have to fix those up. But let's continue on. Bro John Doe, 11.99 euro. How about if there was just two sexes and OFC the intersex people as exceptions, and then everybody else can express their identity however they desire? Peace, love, and harmony.
Yeah, I kind of answered that in chat to this person. This would be a gender abolitionist argument to an extent. So nobody gets a gender because gender is nonsense and they can express themselves however they want. That's the way you want to do it. That's fine. I think it might have some problems with people that are trans and non-binary because these people do not necessarily are all gender abolitionists. But yeah, that's a fine thing to think.
Yeah, when it comes to gender abolition, the way I do sometimes use this term for myself, but what I'm talking about abolishing is not like individuals' identity or the concepts that they identify with necessarily, as much as the stigma around people deviating from like social roles and expectations is what I would seek to abolish. So
I agree to a certain extent. I think that I don't think that it's necessarily hard fit. Like you have to be this way. There are certain aspects of masculinity / being a man that I think that to move away from will lead to the degeneracy of our society. But I can't in certain regards, like I can't respect you as a man. But I think that in whole, like allowing people to be more free with essentially how they choose their life isn't necessarily a bad thing. I don't disagree with that. But like I kind of said, like that's the whole point, right? Live your life how you want to. That doesn't necessarily mean that you need to start quite literally changing what words mean and now trying to force yourself in other spaces and do other things like that.
But we live in a society, Tony. Come on. Kidding.
yeah, of
It's
course.
true. It's the death of the West type thing. Like I believe you have the right to express yourself however you want. However, I think we need more masculine men. Why are men so feminine nowadays? Like they're so estrogen filled. I don't understand.
It's not that they're estrogen filled, it's that they're testosterone lacking. You know, they can't all be me.
They touched one too many receipts.
Let's carry on from there. We have lots of super chats and they're still pouring in like wildfire. So
Nice.
Let's continue. Hot dogs for sale, $2. Ryan, can you name all 1 billion genders right now?
I don't know everybody's name, but I guess I would have to use something like that to be quick about it, right?
That's crazy.
Oh, I'd just say in the live chat, be more specific because I never
can't
know
ask
which
them all,
Ryan
yeah.
you're talking to.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I don't have time to figure out everyone's individual gender. I'll probably just consider like the people I meet, and if they tell me their gender, and then I'll go from there. You know.
All right. Well, that's I think sums that one up. V Radio strikes again for $10 to the panel. What are your thoughts on the chant at Pride? We're here. We're queer. We're coming for your children.
I don't think this question is relevant to the discussion, and I'm not going to
I got an
answer
answer though. I made a video on this one. It got me in a lot of trouble.
So I'll finish it up here. And its impact on relations between LGBTQ and the rest of society.
Oh, that's perfect. That's what my answer was gonna be. I think that there's probably two groups of people who would be chanting that. One, people who are very obviously trying to like let's just, for lack of a better term, let's say right wingers were trying to essentially paint LGBT people as villains, as the bad guys, right? I would agree with that. I think that is one group of the people. The other group of people is people who are actual advocates for the LGBT slash members of the LGBT who are saying it in a sort of satirical way. It's like, haha, wow, these right wingers are so stupid. They actually think that. So now we're going to make a joke at it, right? The problem with it is respectfully, that's not their joke to make. There's a time and a place. It's not at a parade in a populated city when people legitimately do think that. And unfortunately, when it comes to people who legitimately do think that, not all of them will be non-violent about it. Some people will take it as as cringe as it may sound, some people will take it as a declaration of war, which I don't think that they should do. Let me go ahead and make that clear. I don't think that they should do that. I think we shouldn't harm other human beings. In 99.99% of regards, self-defense is obviously important. But it's not their joke to make at that time. You know what I mean? Like, especially now, right? Like, I think there's a study, it was like essentially like like same-sex relationships, like the approval rating has dropped a lot. And it's because of certain things like this, amongst other things, that is just making the average person's approval rating for the LGBT just drop.
The reason that the approval rating between LGBT people has dropped is because of a combination of people being exposed to ideas that are vastly different than their own and not being able to rectify that, as well as right-wing propaganda. The reason I hate this question is because the instance that we're talking about here is probably along the lines of a counter troll, or yes, we're coming for your children so they don't grow up to be bigots like you. Do I agree with this? No. Is it a counter reaction, a reactionary reaction to what the right wing is doing? Yes. If we're going to say that it's not something that people should do, I don't want to hear the argument of we will water the tree of liberty with the blood of tyrants directed at people like Barack Obama or Biden, because that is the same inflammatory language that can cause quote unquote a war. There you go.
Yeah, I just pulled up an article about this, and it sounds like there's like one voice that's loud in this video where there are people clearly heard. I haven't actually listened to the clip. This is what like NBC says about it, so take it with a grain of salt, I guess. But they're saying that most people in the crowd are heard saying "We're here, we're queer, we're not going shopping," and then there is at least one voice that's heard saying though "We're here, we're queer, we're coming for your children." So regardless,
I stitched that video in particular. I got people got really mad. It's like, oh my god, can you listen? Do you have ears? But I've watched the video multiple times. Right, they're at the very least. From what I could pick out, 3 distinct voices who are doing it. One is the cameraman, which people were arguing, oh yeah, the right winger position, right? But there was one woman in all black who was saying it, and you can tell because we're here, we're queer, we're not going shopping. If you can read lips, you can clearly tell that she's not saying it. There's another woman who's completely topless with as X tape or whatever, I'm talking about, like the kind of look like tassels to a degree, like nipple tassels or whatever, and she's saying it as well. You can literally watch the video, you can read their lips, because we're here, we're queer, we're not going shopping. You know what I mean? Like completely different mouth movements. The tempo is different, or the beats that you're hitting are different because you're using different syllables. So it's very obvious that there's more than one person saying it in that video, right? And anyone who says that only one person is saying it, they are objectively lying. They're essentially, and I'm not saying that you're doing it. I'm gonna pick on you for a second. They're doing what essentially Cypher did earlier. It was like, oh yeah, that's not happening. And I'm not saying that you actually did that. It was a reflect. I understand. But no, like they're lying at that point. That's what
okay. But I understand what you're saying, that those people might be lying, but to say that's not happening at all. But I think a lot of most of the people who are putting this, because when I did hear about this story, I didn't look into it until now. But when I've heard about this story, I've heard that there are that there are marches where LGBTQ people are going in the street chanting this, and it paints that sentence alone paints a very different picture than there are 3 people who, if we look at their lips, we can kind of identify are probably saying this rather than the other thing. It's a very different sentiment, I would say, is a dishonest one. I
would agree, but there was an account, I think it was called Gay Pride. Don't quote me on it. I don't remember the exact name. I think it's Gay Pride. I can't look at it because I'm banned on my account. But they posted a video, actually a completely different video, completely unrelated to the other one that I'm talking about. And this is a verified hundreds of thousands of followers account on TikTok. And they posted something from their New York parade, completely different from the other one, where it was like the group was no longer saying we're here, we're queer, we're not going shopping. No, the group was saying, like the overwhelming majority. Yes, that was the group. I again, unfortunately, I can't find the video on their page because after I made my video, they took it down, kind of weird. And I save all of my videos. Someone hit me up after this. I can actually send you the video.
Yeah, I'd be
I think
curious
we
to see.
should
Sure.
move on because I
But
see
yeah.
so many questions being asked, and I'm like,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
There
I
are a
agree.
lot of
This is pretty
questions. I
off-topic.
like letting you guys expound a little bit though, and I know there's gonna be
Sorry, I'm a ranter.
lots more. It's okay. But yeah, we'll try to keep our responses around like a minute each per panelist. If you can kind of keep that in your mind, that'll probably help us get through each. It's all good. Bro John Doe, 11.99. Can y'all explain to me what gender means? Both sides, please. I'm not trying to troll, but in my native language, there's just one word for sex/gender. What is the difference?
Is it Hungarian?
Not sure.
Could be
Wait,
Indian it could be
yeah,
Indian as
Whoever
well.
asked that question, I need you to tell me what language it is, because that's actually one of the points that I always bring up. Not only romance languages, people, it's a common misconception. English is not a romance language. English is a Germanic language, and in romance languages and Germanic languages, they are gendered. That's just how the languages operate, right?
Sure.
In romance languages, you have masculine and feminine, right? We don't really have that in Germanic, but we do have, like gendered pronouns, gender terms, gender words, whatever, right? But this is only specific to certain languages, right? A lot of languages, this isn't the case at all. So the distinction between sex and gender doesn't exist because they just don't have a word for it. Hungarian is one example of that.
Yeah, and,
Right.
and another interesting example is that I believe Han Chinese, whatever that dialect is, I do not recall what it is, do not have different pronouns for men and women either. So there's going to be different cultural things about this that are interesting.
So to the question itself, this is all is interesting. Don't get me wrong, but is kind of tangential to what the question was. It was I in my intro I had these two definitions. Sex I understand to describe the biological attributes of females and males. I also do think that these things are largely gendered, but I think that's a different conversation. But gender is usually describing the socially constructed roles, behaviors, and identities that are in a spectrum, which includes femininity and masculinity. So those are the kind of two. That's the distinction being made, not just by us, but by broadly scientific communities are trying to identify these different things.
Right, well, let's kick it over to Sanvi if you have any thoughts there.
I'm sorry, would you repeat the question?
Oh my God.
It's okay. Can you all explain to me what gender means? And
Yeah,
in
yeah,
his
yeah.
native
So I think
language, it means the same sex and gender. So he's asking, what's the difference?
Okay, yeah. So the way me and Tony defined it in our opening statements was the human conception of the sexes. So sex with respect to the human species solely. And the way that I believe CSP and Ryan defined it was social, psychological, cultural, behavioral traits that we typically associate with the sexes, if that's correct. Yeah.
Broadly.
Oh yeah, what are you doing over there, Tony? You trying to trigger the live chat there with that yawn? You know those are contagious, right? Those are more contagious than COVID, my friend. Oh my, I had to do everything I could to resist that. All right, I promised last time diving in from Gordon Mercer, $10. Don't worry about diving in here, buddy. We're having fun. If we're bugging these labels as we should, masculinity and femininity don't matter. I am who I am. Making the argument from other people's labels is self-defeating.
I mean,
maybe other people shouldn't have their own labels, and we should use words and mean the same thing.
Well, I think people, like, regardless of how different people might feel about the words masculinity and femininity, I think these things mean like people have very strong attachments to these things and values that are associated with them, and that is very meaningful to a lot of different people, trans and cis. So I don't think that we necessarily need to remove them, but we should definitely shift expectations around what these things necessarily mean. And that doesn't mean that I think that men should be less strong. I think probably broadly more people in general should be stronger. I think that's good. I don't think we need to abolish the idea of gains for the sake of gender abolition. I don't think that those two go hand in hand at all.
Well, I think we should move on from there. So let's just move on. And back into Pointless Puppy has another one, $4.99. Tony, so if I can't prove I like the color blue, my like doesn't exist.
Bro.
Ooh,
Like,
brutal.
did you expect me to say
Right out
like
of the park.
no
That was
like that
just
like that's the answer to the question. Like yeah like what you think cannot be proven, therefore objectively it is not true. I don't think that's a crazy statement.
I disagree with that. No, I think just because you can't prove something doesn't mean that something is not the case. That doesn't logically follow.
Objectively true.
Yeah, that
Not-
doesn't follow either.
No,
but
it
it's
does.
Zombie side on this one.
It's
Yeah.
fine. I'm sorry. I'm just a little nerdy about formal logic. That doesn't follow.
Yes, I know. I've heard. Yes, I hear when you and your boyfriend get into philosophical arguments and I fall asleep. Yes, I understand. Every single time, like him and someone else, like I just pass out.
Well, let's try to move on from there. I thought that was going to be succinct, but we had a little expounding onto it. I was like, oh, just that's it. Just snap the fingers and it's over. And Joel Leinbach, $5. If gender doesn't relate to biological sex, what is gender?
Well, again, I'll say gender is socially constructed roles, behaviors, and identities in a spectrum, including femininity and masculinity. But I don't think that it's like completely separable from sex. That I think most people are cis. Most people identify as men or women, and this aligns with like gender assigned at birth, and most people are fine with this. So I don't think that means that like I don't think we can say there's no connection between these things. Like there's obviously a huge overlap, but there are also tons of people who deviate from these, and increasingly it seems more and more as we make this option more livable for people. So interesting.
All right, let's try to move on from there if everybody's got their thoughts out on that. Yeah. All right. Earth 1G RSD 250. That's what he paid in. Much love to Sanvi and Tony. You're doing a huge favor to the world, and I hope you continue the debates. Don't want it to spread to my country.
I did see that comment. God bless you. God bless you. I don't know where you're at, but
There are trans people in your country, so
Serbian.
Yeah.
That's what I just Googled what RSD is.
But okay, but that's the thing, right? Like there's a difference between trans people and the ideology. Like I know that people on the left generally don't see a distinction between it, but like I do. I don't know about Sanvi. I'm pretty sure she does too. But like
Yeah,
there's a distinction between it, right? Like a trans woman being a trans woman, that's fine. Like no one, whatever,
Well,
right? But a trans woman being a woman, that's where the ideology comes into play, right? So trans individuals, if you want to define trans individuals as people more or less who intentionally present as the opposite sex or as the opposite gender even, right, then fine, right, then yeah, like there are probably men in every country who want to do things that are typically associated with women and vice versa, right, but they don't want the ideology. That's what they don't want.
To be clear, I think a lot of the countries that would reject our positions would also reject what you just said, where they even are presenting that way. I think it's criminalized in pretty extreme ways in a lot of places. And I think
a lot of places, but I
concept,
wouldn't. A lot of places, yes. Most places, no.
Thank God, yeah.
Yeah, right. So like again, like and if you want to call like the extreme places, like countries in the Middle East, countries in Asia, yeah, countries in Africa, fine, right? But even then, that's other than the Middle East, that one's pretty much the entire place. But like Africa, Asia, right? Like it's like mostly no one cares if you want to do things that are typically associated with the opposite sex, right? They might look at you weird, they might treat you differently, that's fine, right? Like yeah, of course people would treat you differently for doing anything that's outside.
They might discriminate against you specifically, I think, is the problem that we'd be more concerned about. Like treating you differently might mean refusing a job to you, might be refusing a place to live for you, might be refusing you healthcare. These are the things that we deal with even here in America.
Violating your human right.
Well, let's try to move on from there.
I don't think you have a human right entitled to somebody else's labor, but that's a different discussion.
Yeah.
Well, nobody's okay.
Anti-profit Sanvi, love it.
Yeah, for sure. We can definitely, like I said, figure out some more discussions in the future. We only have 2 more super chats to go as of right now, unless anything changes. 3 super chats to go, unless anything changes. So we're going to carry on. Damien Gershwin, $5. CSP and Ryan, would you prefer to live in a society where teen girls become involuntarily exposed to more or fewer strangers' penises, more or fewer?
That is an odd way to say that.
Yeah, I don't.
I'll say fewer. I think we wouldn't want people to be involuntarily
because you don't want to. You don't want to do it
do
with children can't consent to things. So there you go. Right.
Wait a damn minute.
Wait.
Children. Okay. I don't
even think that. What's crazy is I think we have different points because I think I know what her point is, and my point isn't that. So Sanvi, I'll let you go first.
No, it's fine. I don't want to convolute the
Okay.
discussion. We have a lot to
Okay,
get there.
okay.
I mean, if I can maybe end cap on what was just almost happened, I think we would differentiate between consent to sexual acts and consent to like certain medical procedures. I think there's a big distinction there. I don't think one necessitates the other by any means.
Do you think minors should be able to get HRT,
Potentially.
but they shouldn't be allowed to consent to intercourse?
I mean, they can with each other, right?
Yeah.
No.
No,
if you're under no,
It's legal for
16-year-olds
16-year-olds to have sex.
Yeah, 16.
together.
Okay, yes, but you
Yeah.
still have 15, quite literally 15 other
yeah.
years of minor.
Okay,
When
so
I
it's
say-
illegal,
hold on,
but
when
who's
I say
enforcing
minor-
that law? Are they going to
Sure.
throw
When
these
I say
children in
minors,
prison?
I'm thinking
Yeah.
more 13, 14.
And
And by the way, who's enforcing that? I actually did it. I wrote something about this a long time ago. If you are under the age of consent, even if two people are under the age of consent and they engage in things, there can still potentially be ramifications, and there have been legally in the past. Now, I know that the law
Sure.
is lax on it because, people don't regard it as bad, but there are potential ramifications for that because it's not good. That means both parties didn't consent.
Well, let's continue on.
It's a different conversation, but I hear you. Yeah.
Quelo for $5 Canadian. There you go. From Canada. Ryan and CSP, do you see it as a contradiction for a homosexual to be in disagreement with transgenderism? If so, shouldn't they advocate separately?
The contradiction, not necessarily. I think that if you wanted to impose your legally, if you wanted legal support for your position against quote unquote transgender ideology, the people you would have to vote for, they have not removed being anti-gay marriage from their platform. So you're going to be supporting people who are absolutely against your own interest as well as the interest of the trans community. Doesn't mean there's necessarily a contradiction there, but I think broadly you would have to support things that would be bad for you probably. So there's that.
I don't have anything to add.
All right, well, let's carry on. Quelo, yeah, that was the one we just read
God.
there. Bro John Doe, €249. Do man and women refer to sex or gender?
Who is that for?
I guess, anybody can really jump in on this one.
Generally gender, but I think that again, I think a lot of people use them in the way that Sanvi and Tony are suggesting. I think it's common. I just think that we should understand that there's a distinction being made when people are referring to like someone's identity versus what their biological sex is. Like,
I mean,
we
yeah, I
can
think we
understand
all
that they're
agree
saying
that when
something
most
different.
people refer to women, they're referring to adult human females and men, adult human males. So it's like it is a gender, but it's intrinsically tied to sex for the majority of people.
Yeah, like the overwhelming majority of people. Like again, and I just want to bring it the rooster. Like rooster is a chicken's gender. Like gender is quite literally just the
Stop with the
individual.
rooster.
Like gender is just the specific sex of a specific species.
I'll
more or
say
less.
again to the rooster thing. Roosters don't have the capacity for a gender identity, so
And that's
don't
why
really
I said
care
gender.
about-
And remember conflating terms. That's why I didn't use the term gender identity.
Well, I understand that, but you're using this as a bridge to say then that like we have no need for it in humans, but humans do have the concept of gender identity, do have the capacity for gender identity. So that's why we engage with it in terms of humans, and we don't care about whether or not roosters identify as roosters.
So basically, animals have always had gender. Now, in order to make things, I guess, better somehow, then now we have to get rid of the fact that animals have gender.
We can refer to like gender roles that that roosters might take on. Like,
I'm not
we
even
can talk
talking about gender.
talk-
I'm not talking about gender.
Well, if
roles.
we're talking about gender, we're talking about, I'm using it as an umbrella term to refer to all sorts of different things. So primarily we might refer to traits and roles that are traditionally associated with with the roosters, the male chickens, and vice versa. Like we could describe these as gendered traits within this species, just like we could with any species. But we wouldn't have the need to talk about identity in those cases, is all I'm saying.
All right, well, let's read our last super chat here, and then we'll do some closing thoughts, all right? All right. Hot dogs for sale. Hot dogs for sale.
I saw this question.
Back scratcher. $2. How many genders are in the Talmud?
Oh my God. I
don't know I don't even know what that is.
The Talmud is
Is that the
yes,
Jewish?
yes.
Yeah, okay,
It's a
that's
Jewish
what I
doctrine.
figured.
Yes.
Who even cares? You should read the New Testament instead.
W answer. But even still, like the thing about it is, Sanvi, is the answer. The reason why bringing up the Torah or the Talmud is important is because their answer would be our answer, right? Because obviously, like the Bible has, the same books, just more of them, right? So this is basically an argument that people bring up where they like to say the Torah, the Talmud, the Old Testament Bible, that that they recognize multiple genders, and they don't, right? And then this is what I'm talking about when I'm going all the way back. This is what I mean when we talk about like things like cultural imperialism, right? Because you're taking modern ways that we look at things in modern senses, and you're trying to apply them to things that are thousands of years old, right? Different, like a gender, whatever gender, a gender performing different gender roles does not make them a new gender. Okay, this is an extremely modern, very, very modern concept, and a very Western modern concept, right? So how many genders are in the Talmud? 2. How many genders in the Torah? 2. Bible? 2. Like the answer is always the same.
So I would agree. Like I don't care what Abrahamic religious books have to say about how many genders there are. Obviously, I think it's relevant in like cultural discourse because we have to deal with the fact that people do think they know what the creator of the universe wants and that they can impose that on other people. But in terms of the people, like historically, whether these things have existed, the words that we're using to describe it might be used in relatively new context, but the things that they're describing have always existed. There have always been gender roles. There's always been gender identity. There's always been incongruence between those things, expression and expectations. This has absolutely always existed, and it always will exist. And if we refuse the language that we are again in line with using that the scientific community seems to be increasingly broadly embracing, I think we're just robbing ourselves of more information about the world, which I think is a bad thing to do.
Gender identity is also part of the ideology. It's a very modern thing.
I don't think so. I don't think that is
but that's the thing. But it like quite literally is, right? And to like look back, it's like, so. Oh well, this is basically gender identity. It's exactly what I'm talking about, right? Like gender. Nobody used gender identity before.
Then we can't know anything about anything in the past because we can't have a direct connection to it and understand what they're saying in the context of it. We can only put it in the context of what we know, and if we see similar concepts of the past that make sense to a modern vernacular, then it is not cultural imperialism or whatever else that you want to call this. It's just us trying to interpret it best that we can with the limited knowledge that we have.
All right, well, hot dogs for sale clarified. I'm going to read this one first before I read our compliment. $2. Talmud has 8 genders.
I knew you'd say
not
that.
The Old Testament is what they said. So any thoughts on that?
Here's my
the answer. They already gave the
answer.
That my thoughts are that Jesus is the Messiah. So
Amen.
That's all.
All right, well, let's move into our closing statements, and we will kick it over to CSP for 1 minute for your closing thoughts there, buddy.
Again, everybody, thank you for tuning into this debate. It was a good debate. Everybody kept respect, and I appreciate that. So thank you, Sanvi. Thank you, Tony, for showing respect and not getting too much into the chat or whatever else was going on. And I apologize for my reflexive reactions sometimes. But,
You're fine.
We're all trying to be better. I think that we didn't really get to the meat of the question to a degree simply because we simply disagreed about what gender actually is. And since we disagree what gender actually is, this discussion really is just going to be in the eye of the beholder. And we didn't do a very good job we did a good job of putting our positions out there. But as far as where we should be at, I don't think that we have that answer. Hence why we're having these discussions, and we'll continue to have them in the future. With that, everybody, I'm going to concede time. Yield. That's the word.
I was like, I don't think "conced's" the right word there. I could be wrong. Yeah.
Isn't
That's
it
good.
seed? Like I seed the rest of my time.
Yeah.
There you go.
Seed, yield. Yeah.
I like it. It just made me think maybe I'll just play some Skyrim. I yield. All right, over to you, Ryan.
Yeah. So I don't think that our opposition here has made a very strong case for rejecting this modern conception of gender. I think that, again, these words are referring to things that have always existed. Just to once again hammer down what I'm referring to, like sex, we're describing the biological attributes of females and males. No one's denying the existence of these things. That women grow breasts and have vaginas and uterus and all these things, and that men don't and do other things. And we're not we're referring to gender as socially constructed roles, behaviors, and identities, which are in a spectrum spectrum that includes femininity and masculinity. Obviously, these things are closely tied to sex in a lot of ways. Most people are cisgender. Most people, their gender aligns with their sex. Many people, it does not. We consider those people transgender, and they are perfectly valid configurations of human beings, as far as I can tell. I think that recognizing the distinction between these two concepts gives us more information about the world, better words to describe what we're looking at and what people are saying about their experience as human beings, and we should allow that instead of rejecting it.
All right, we'll keep moving from left. From right to left, I guess, from side. I'm looking at the Zoom call as well. So over to you, Tony, for your closing thoughts.
I have to do my traditional toxically masculine ways, and it goes ladies first.
Wow.
Don't shake your head like that.
So
Well,
do you cede your time?
To her, and then I go. She goes first.
you should have seen when I asked to have a prayer before the debate. He said women can't lead prayer.
I muted her in Discord so quickly.
Okay, but my closing thoughts on this basically, the reason why we do have fundamental different things we're referring to when we refer to gender is because I believe we already have other terms that encompass what you guys are calling gender, right? Like I believe we already do have gender norms, gender expectations, cultural views of masculinity and femininity without calling it gender, because man and woman are gender terms, but we know we can have men and women that contradict these other notions and whatnot. So that's kind of where I'm coming from and why I defend the position that there are only two genders, because there are only two sexes, because it provides clarity when we're having these conversations. I think it's more useful in terms of truth, and I think we don't have to accept as many absurd conclusions that table genders are valid. But off to you, Tony.
One of the biggest reasons that I have this debate isn't even because of what it means in the modern sense, right? Honestly, someone mentioned earlier that that the internet age of information is essentially why these ideas are allowed to grow and spread so fast. But because of that, they're not put through the ringer that essentially that we've had for all of human time, where the people that will actually accept this, right? They're not put through the same sort of social ringer, because anybody can say anything from behind a computer screen, right? But at the end of the day, it is that hypothetical that I put, I hope to God that it doesn't happen. 30 years, you see a massive wave of suicide because people were essentially felt like they were lied to with the ideology. But that's essentially why I have the biggest problem that I do with it. It's completely outside of the religious thing. It's like, in 30 years time, where will we be? Where does this lead? Right? Because it's very easy to keep this to the gender discussion, right? As everyone always tries to do, because if you ever give any other example, it's essentially, it's not the same thing. Right. But like, there are other things that we can pretty much all agree are also social aspects in the exact same sense of how gender is a social aspect and how the left thinks about it, right? Race is a completely social aspect, right? The fact that it pretty much, it was supposed to be short. Okay, fine.
Sorry, it's okay.
So yeah. Sorry. The fact that it can exist in multiple different areas is exactly the problem. I don't know where else it will go, and I'm afraid of where it could go. That's basically the whole thing. Sorry.
All right, no, that's okay. I just wanted to let you know that it's all right. We went a little bit long, so big shout out to our speakers here, CSP, Ryan, Sanvi, and Tony. We will definitely talk about getting you guys back and having more discussions. It was a good time, I'm sure, for everybody. And I'm glad that this old 50s mic, it did the thing.
Listen, no, I'm telling you, man, it gives you the put your head on my, like, it gives that whole vibe, like you're just sitting there swinging and vibing, like you're singing the love, like to your love. Yeah,
exactly. I should be weaving and bobbing a bit, right?
Yes,
or at least putting on that transatlantic accent. Hey, everybody. I am one of the two genders. Justin tonight on the show. This was our debate. Make sure that you hit that like button while you're on the live stream. I see you guys are still asking some questions, but I can't hold it up, guys. I had to drop it. I was gonna say, it's like my Jordan Peterson impression. It slowly becomes Kermit. Anyways,
oh my God.
Speaking of which, we're gonna close down. So thanks everybody for coming out. And I won't be doing too much of Peterson or any of that sort of thing tonight.
My goodness.
You guys have a good night, and I'm gonna put on some of my tunes here to close out the show for the live chat. So you guys enjoy.
I was hoping Sanvi would stick around so we could trade contact information to do this again, but hey, whatever.
Yeah, do you have Discord?
I do have Discord. Same
Don't
CSP
tell,
Cypher
don't tell
is.
her that I'm sending this to you. You didn't get this from me, but I'm giving you her
I
Discord.
mean, she might be in
I'll find you
chat,
guys
so.
on
Originally known. How do I-
CSP Cypher is my Discord handle.
Are we still
I'll
live
be-
All
currently?
lowercase.
No. I'm just gonna
And
put it in
I'll
the chat.
stop
Wait, where can I
streaming
bring-
too.